central government still we need the approval of the central government, but we've already started the preparation for this mission. For instance, as Yansong has mentioned, during the maiden flight of the Long March-2F Y12, we have the test vehicle. The test vehicle, theoretically speaking, for the low Earth orbit missions, which can have 6 to 7 crew. But for a lunar mission, maybe 3 to 4 astronauts. This new generation spaceship is designed for the lunar missions. You know that during this the test flight, it reached its orbit with its own engine to apogee about 3,000 kilometers to simulate the re-entry like the spaceship from the moon. So this is a very good preparation for the future, although it is a test vehicle, a prototype, as we mentioned, not the final version. But still, it is a first step. And also, you know that for going to the moon, the Long March 5 is not big enough. So we need a super heavy launch vehicle. The you know that on the
Long March 9.
Yeah, maybe Long March 9, it has already exhibited in the windows of our cast and casting. She's also very enthusiastic to space education, and she also attended many. We've already testing many necessary technologies for this rocket. The 510 level thrust big rocket engines. We've already testing many necessary technologies for these rocket engines. So this, I believe that sooner or later we can have these potential lunar missions.
And as we speak, the 3 astronauts, they are on their way carrying the Shenzhou 12 mission will lift off.
These potential lunar missions.
And as we speak, the 3 astronauts, they are on their way to the launch pad. And
This,
if you're just joining us, you're watching our
missions.
special coverage of the Shenzhou 12 mission. The 3 astronauts, they are on their way to the launch pad.
This,
Long March is going to have watching our coverage of the Shenzhou 12 mission. The 3 astronauts, they are off at the time of 9:22 Beijing time, and when that happens, we are going to bring it live to you all the way through. And I'm just wondering, you know, sitting on that van, when do you think the astronaut got up this morning? Did they have breakfast?
Maybe earlier
What
than
was it
us.
like in the morning of the big day?
Maybe earlier than us because they have to suit up.
They have to suit up.
And before suit up, they have to do a complete health check and complete all personal things. I think probably 3 o'clock, 3:30, they got up.
Yeah, yesterday I was told that they would get up at 3.
Yeah.
So
3 a.m.
3 a.m.
And they've already put on the suit. After they put on the suit, do they get to go to the bathroom, or they have put on
They have
diapers?
to do the bathroom thing first.
And they're going to have a very long day.
Yeah.
And also, they should have diaper. But this diaper is specially designed, much more
space
high performance than the diaper we use daily.
High capacity diaper.
But actually, the diaper today, the baby diaper was the firstly used by
There you
astronauts.
have it.
in
So
outer
the
space.
astronauts
A
I
look at
mentioned.
the launch tower.
Yeah.
But you cannot see the rocket at the time, right? Because that's enclosed in that steel structure, the blue steel structure. But as we get close to the launch, the retractable platform on that umbilical tower is going to open up, releasing the rocket. Then you can see the full view of the launch vehicle.
Well, the launch pad has something very special. It has a lift to go up, but it has a tube to go down. It's like a
Talk
garbage
to us
tube.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do
That's
have the white one. If you're
Yeah.
looking at this video, and you can see this,
On the
there is
left
the white
side.
line on the left side. That's its escape route.
No, escape route is just inside. It's like it's a garbage tube, but it's inside is with rubber. So
So
if
astronaut
there's
can
in
jump
case of
in.
emergency, they have a dumper bunker underneath.
Yeah.
So the
So
in
that's
case
an emergency escape
emergency
system.
escape. Yeah. The rocket itself, as well as the launch pad, is designed for safety. On the launch pad, you have the escape tube, but during the launch, you have the escape tower
Yes.
on the top, and then in orbit, you have also recovered capsule. So that recent incident from Russia was 100 kilometers altitude, but they escaped safely. So they have arrived.
So the crew arriving at the launch tower, there see the tube right
you can
there.
see the Gobi Desert on back of on the.
Yeah, a fantastic view. There, the astronauts will hop on an elevator which will take them up to the 9th floor. I guess that is the floor where they will get into the spacecraft. But they will get into the spacecraft through the orbital module, right?
They will go inside the Shenzhou spacecraft from the side hatch of the orbital module. And then they will go down to the re-entry capsule.
Re-entry capsule.
And then the hatch of the side module will be sealed. And as Yansheng has mentioned, during this phase, if anything wrong happened to the launch vehicle, they will use the emergency escape system.
And for those of you who are wondering, it won't be a free fall. There are resistance material inside that tube, so that they will, slide down safely and arrive into the bunker.
And Long March-2F is the tallest rocket in the Long March family. It's got like 58 meters high.
58
just
meters,
because they have the extra height of that escape tower.
The escape tower
on top of the fairing.
Yeah.
When this whole structure open up and you can see this, you can get a clear view.
There you see the crew getting out of the van, waving to the crowds, big smiles on their face. Nie Haisheng leading the team, followed by flight engineers Liu Boming and Tang Hongbo. Let's listen in.
我们在北京等你们凯旋而归。
All right, that's Nie Haisheng reporting to Chief Commander before departure. They look pretty chill to me. Of course, the media is documenting everything.
Yeah.
Staffs are waiting there to assist them.
Always the moment is coming.
And it is 6:52 Beijing time.
And our launching window is 9:22. That means they're going to stay there for quite a long time.
Quite a long time, two and a half hours.
They have performed multiple check-ins.
Yeah. What they have to do during this period of time?
So when they get into the cabin, they should check the air tightness of their spaceship. You know that disaster happened before during the former Soviet Union, the Soyuz 11 missions. During the re-entry, because the 3 astronauts had not wearing IVA space suits, because a valve have some malfunction, the pressure lowering down to almost a vacuum condition, and the 3 astronauts died during this course. So this is after this mission, all the spaceship, including those for the former Soviet Union and the U.S., all during the launch and during the landing, they must wearing the IVA spacesuits. But for the IVA spacesuits, if we want it to work properly, we must check if the airtight sealings is properly done. So that this must be checked. And also they must check the many parameters of the spaceship, including those for the emergency escape and for the handling operation of the spaceship. So they must check everything. That need time.
And also, the astronauts stays there. After they complete the checkings, they will have to do a hands-off thing because it's a rocket launch, rather than an astronaut operation. So the rocket has to be unlocked and fueled and checked and launched. So they're waiting basically for the launch vehicle to be ready. So they also complete their checking and they do it, like a hands-off thing and wait for the launch to happen.
Yes. This Long March-2F rocket is called human-rated launch vehicle, which means it's qualified to carry humans into space. Which is the only one. In the future, Long March-7 is also potentially, hopefully, to become a second human-rated launch vehicle for China for the new generation's spaceship. So at that era, we can send 6 to 7 astronauts to our space station, with only one launch. But for the moon missions, we need bigger ones. This Long March-2F, the reliability of this launch vehicle is 0.97 or 97%. You know that this is not enough, safe enough for astronauts because.
I'm sorry. There you see the crew entering the small area where they can get access to the spacecraft, sitting on the chairs, patiently waiting. What kind of final checks up would they go through here?
Yeah, the ground staff will check, as Yansheng has mentioned, their medical parameters, their health condition, and also some instruments on their spaceship. and they will help them to get inside because you know that the hatch is very small. The ground staff will help them to go inside, especially protect their helmet, not to be clapped with the side of the hatch. So this is very important to ensure their safety. And I believe at this current stage, the ground staff is still inside the Shenzhou spaceship to check everything.
Okay.
Right, who said this?
We are seeing staff wearing different colors of uniform, some in blue, some in white. Mr. Xu, what are their jobs?
The blue part is just like a constraints, to not to explode the suit because they.
No, I mean the ground staff.
This ground crew. Okay.
Yes.
So they're
blue.
taking off their shoes, I think.
No,
what they're
are
trying
their
to do
like,
is that
are they engineers? Are they rocket scientists? Because
no, they're just like a servant to the astronauts, like valets.
To help them.
Personal
to help
valets.
Them
get
wear
into the
shoes.
spacecraft.
Yeah.
So I
leave
guess
the
it's not that easy to walk in that heavy suit.
They don't need to walk anymore once you're there in outer space. They're floating, so
really
they're changing.
Yeah, I really want to try that kind of suit.
Without training, it's very difficult for you to wearing it. Very difficult.
Yeah?
Yes,
You
it's
must
very-
have some training.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, to get
Yeah,
into the suit.
exactly.
You cannot even put on your shoes by yourself. You have to. You need help from others.
So yeah, you know that inside still there are ventilation pipes for the cooling.
Yeah.
Because it's airtight ceiling, so if we don't have a ventilation system, it will be very hot. So that is reason, as we have discussed, they have a box to connect to the. There is a pipe connected to the suit, and after they get into the cabin, there will the pipe will directly connect it to the re-entry capsule for the ventilation. And also, this ventilation not can only do this, but also provide oxygen during emergency cases. You know that the helmet will close during the liftoff. If the cabin has lost its pressure, the oxygen will be provided from the pipe.
All right, that's a great split screen showing you the different angles of the capsule now. I guess 2 on the right are showing you the inside of the capsule, 2 on the left showing outside capsule. And I think the upper right one where you are seeing, it's the area behind the 3 seats in the returning capsule. And the hole right there is the hatch connecting the returning capsule to the service capsule.
Exactly.
I guess.
You see that on the top left is the camera towards the side
Entrance.
hatch.
That's the entrance.
Yes, the entrance,
fairing
actually
room, yeah.
speaking, on the orbital module, the side hatch. So the 3 astronauts go one by one into this, first into this hatch, and then go down to the re-entry capsule. The side
entrance.
hatch.
That's the
You can
entrance.
see there's
Yes,
a-
the
like a
entrance,
slide.
The fairing
actually
room, yeah.
speaking,
Slide
on
the
the
astronauts
orbital
in.
module,
Lie
the side hatch.
Yeah.
So the 3 astronauts go one
And
by
as
one
we speak,
into
how many
this,
ground
first
staffs
into this
are
hatch,
there
and then go
approximately
down
at the
to
launch
the
tower,
re-entry
and
capsule.
when
Side
do
hatch.
they
That's the
leave
entrance.
launch
Yes, the
like a
entrance.
slide.
tower?
I think there are roughly 12 or 14
Oh, so not that
people
mu-
there.
not that many.
And there has to be inside the hatch to help the astronauts to enter the service module and then go up to the return capsule. So they have to physically help them to move in to the space capsule.
Ah, the crew.
Well, since the astronauts
smiling
is
and
waving to the camera, it seems they're really relaxed.
excited. Ah, they look
They're
pretty
fully
chill to
prepared,
me.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and then the crew has to leave at the about 20 minutes or
20
half an
minutes.
hour before the launch it's happening. So at 9 o'clock, all hands are off. You know, the people who are serving the astronauts will be in the bunker
Yeah.
underneath the launch pad. So
Oh.
they will not go to the habited areas there or the control center. They will just stay there just in case anything happens.
Also, talk to us a bit more. More about this split screen. We've just talked about the upper left and upper right. What about the bottom?
To get
Yes,
to get away
and the
from
requirement to the emergency escape system is that even if on the launch pad, on the launch complex,
they could blast off.
they
away.
could blast off and to a very high altitude, safe for deploy the parachute.
with the core rocket still standing there.
Yes. So this too happened during the launch of the former Soviet Union's Soyuz spaceship.
Soyuz ship.
You could
Oh.
see, you could hear
All right,
from.
the flight commander is about to slide in the spacecraft. Again, he will be entering the orbiting module, and then from there, he will enter the re-entry module and take his seat.
You may notice they need help of the ground staff.
Yes, and
To slide
another
in.
staff inside the
Inside.
capsule assisting him as well.
This is a view from the orbital module.
to pull his legs.
And we should interview this person. And what was the words the astronaut talked to? Because
Right before launch.
Yeah, he is the last person
Who talked
this astronaut talked to.
Well, the flight commanders will talk to him in comms. There you see the flight commander Nie Haisheng descending into the re-entry module, about to take his seat.
I believe this is
oh,
not
this is
Nie
not Nie
Haisheng.
Haisheng. So let's see who is.
I think Nie
who
Haisheng is going
this?
to be the last one to get into that.
Probably.
Well, he will
this is-
either be
maybe this is Hongbo
Liu
or
Boming
Boming.
or Tang Hongbo, right?
It's based on their sitting position.
That's right.
They
Yes.
have to sit on side and
So the commander will sit in the
In
middle.
the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll wait to see
So
we
he will
get
be the
a
last one
clear
to
look.
go inside.
Will their families be watching?
I
think
believe so.
Will they be watching at the launch site?
I believe
Yeah.
maybe it is a tradition that their family, their relatives will go to see the launch,
Yeah.
to watch the launch.
Or because of the communications, as you have heard from the background, there are checks and checks because there are a number of stations that is doing the telemetry tracking and control, TTNC, and that's lied along with the launch track. So number of stations, including also ocean-going boats, have their antennas ready and ready for the mission. So communication is going to be important once it's launched.
Here we are, another astronaut getting into the orbital module, and we cannot be sure who that is, but we will tell you once we get a clear visual of them.
One of the three.
One of the three.
So this one will go to the other side.
So I've just heard from our control room director, it's going to be in the order of Tang Hongbo, Liu Boming, and lastly Nie Haisheng. So
Yeah,
this
Liu Fuller
is
will sit in
Yeah.
We'll sit in between them.
So the first who got in was the
This
youngest.
is Boming. This is
Boming.
Boming.
And now this
So
is
Liu
Liu
Boming is
Boming.
waving to the camera.
This
It's on
will
the far
be
side.
Liu Boming's second space mission. He has flown on the Shenzhou 11 mission. Is that right?
Shenzhou 7 mission.
Seven.
Yeah, Shenzhou 7 mission.
During the
EVA.
Shenzhou 7 mission, he wears the all-land spacesuit from Russia to help Mr. Zhai Zhigang, who wears the Feitian spacesuit.
Their maiden spacewalk.
Yeah,
So for this time, are they all wearing made in China suits?
exactly. So this time we will have an improved version of our Feitian spacesuits to perform the more complicated EVA. So this one must be Mr. Nie Haisheng.
Right, the commander of this mission.
Yep.
His third flight.
You may notice that just on the top there is an object which also belongs to the emergency escape rocket. During the launch, after the jettisoning of the emergency
tower.
escape tower, this may work if anything wrong happened.
So that's for a higher level flight, right?
Exactly, on
After
a higher
the escape
altitude.
tower separation,
Yes.
if there is an event of an emergency, the fairing also have the engine, like Professor Yang just pointed out, and that will kick in, and that'll take astronauts away from the rockets, I guess.
You can see on the left side of Nie Haisheng the hatch between the service module and the recovered capsule.
That hatch will be closed after they get into.
Yeah.
What do you
the
think he's
capsule.
doing now? He's holding this board.
Yes,
They got some
Checking
paper-
out some
there are
lists.
items
Paper
on
works
the
to do.
on the paper. So he will check one by one. So if this parameter is okay, the next one. So he must check everything should be okay. The same routine since Yang Liwei's Shenzhou 5 mission. All the same.
What kind of content will be on that checklist?
For
Such as?
instance, maybe some switch should be in the right position, and also there are some parameters echoed on the instruments, so they must check everything is okay.
I have to familiarize with the service module because the service module interior has some cargoes, and once they're in space, they have to know where exactly what is where. So he's tracking, just in case the ground crew has left, and for the last minute information to keep everything in position in the service module.
And they also have a handbook. So during the launch process, they can visit this handbook to help them if anything wrong happened, all kinds of malfunctions, they can deal with that.
Yeah.
So this is also very useful and very helpful.
They spent a lot of time on
Emergency
reading.
trainings,
That's
yeah.
right. Right before this launch day. And it's been a-
6,000 hours each.
Yeah.
So talk to us about these trainings. I mean, they also take training to help them to withstand the G-forces during a rocket launch, right?
Exactly. They must be trained. You know that in China's astronaut center, there is this kind of facility to simulate the overload or the G forces up to 8G. So you know that during the launch, usually we only experience 3 to 4G. But in the emergency escape, they may experience up to 8, even 9G. So the astronauts must be trained, although usually this will not happen.
But there was a case where there was a Korean astronaut. She experienced 12G because the maximum the human body can tolerate
think
is
it's 8 or 9.
13G.
Okay.
And then after that, you die.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but she came back
It's
safely.
just pretty close, that close to death.
Yeah, when they are asking her how her feeling was, and she said it was very sportive.
What you mentioned is Miss So Yin-yi,
Yeah.
who is the first female astronaut of Korean, who is also my friend.
Yeah.
And about the emergency trainings we were talking about, I guess when there's an emergency in space, you really don't have much time to think, right? You have to take action immediately, but what kind of major emergencies will they be encountering when they're in space? Depressurization, what kind of scenarios?
Fire.
Fire.
Yeah.
Or-
Depressurization is the most fatal things happened. So they must have IVA spacesuits to protect themselves to increase the reliability for survival. you see that during the liftoff and during the critical points, for instance, such as the docking, rendezvous and the docking, and during the re-entry, they must wear their IBA space suits. And also to, as I mentioned, first they should check the airtight sealings.
Okay.
All right. So
What
if
are
you're
they
listening,
doing now?
If you're listening to the radio, if you cannot watch this the video right now, if you listen through the China Radio International, that we can brief you that the 3 astronauts are in position in their re-entry capsule. So they're well, it seems they're quite busy preparing for the final check.
So what are they doing now?
You can see Hongbo has just take out a handbook from the bag. So they must check everything.
That's
and
the
also-
flight manual. In the middle, what is Nie Haisheng holding? That yellow bag. What's inside the bag?
He's putting everything inside a bag because once you're in space, you're floating, and everything floats. So it has to be in a everything has to be attached to something. So he's putting anything extra into the bag so it doesn't float around and affects the flight itself. So they're holding the book, the flight schedule or flight book, so they have to check and tick everything, and during the whole process, everything has to be kept in a bag and put somewhere so it doesn't float once it's in outer space.
Yes.
It takes just 10 minutes to get there.
Wow. And what is that big orange package hanging on the wall just behind their seats? Do you
You can
see
get a
on the bottom
view.
on the bottom right screen? There's an orange big package there.
I think
Is that
that's
the lifeboat?
No, I think it's probably lifeboat. Coming back in case of emergency, lifeboat or a parachute, something like that.
I mean, if you're landing on a
usually
sea,
there are some resupplies. For instance, in some special cases, maybe you cannot go into the orbital module. Most of the food are stored in the orbital module. So during the liftoff, usually they should also store a little small amount of food, water inside the re-entry capsule. In case that for instance, if the hatch have some malfunction, they cannot open it, or something wrong happened to the orbital module. For instance, such as depressurization. So they must have something inside this. And also, that they even have a pistol, they even have a gun. In the
They're
reentry
about
capsule.
where they-
that during the emergency escape, they may land it anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe in the forest,
Yeah.
maybe in the grassland.
That's
So maybe
right.
there are wild animals. They must protect themselves. And also there are some echoes for the rescue teams to find them more easily.
I think that kind of emergency happened to the
One of the
the
Russians,
U.S.
One
Russian.
of
Russian,
Russian.
yes, especially during the Voskhod 2 mission. After the first EVA by Leonov, Mr. Belayev and Leonov landed to an
Forest.
unpredicted site, and no one can find them. So they must protect themselves, even with the gun.
But it's been said that new technologies has been added to the spacecraft to make sure that they have a more precise landing spot.
Yes, it also has positioning device such as our Beidou receiver and so on. So they can send signals to show the ground rescue team where they are.
And one thing to notice is that this time they have changed the landing site.
That's right. It used to be in Inner Mongolia.
It's still in Inner Mongolia, but it's the proximity is closer to the launch site.
To the launch site.
So the logistic is easier. Otherwise, it takes a long time for a rescue team to go there, and you have to search it with helicopters and everything. But with the new launching landing site, probably it's much easier to receive the signals, the radio beacons, and everything, and the rescue team can get there easily and provide better logistic and safety.
And that is also a very critical mission for this time to verify this re-entry site. This is going to be their first time to use that.
Yeah, it's the first time they're going to use the first the new landing site, and that's also requires a lot of control in orbit, and also a lot of TTNC and telescope, let's say, and all the facilities that you need to guarantee a safe landing.
And you're
What
watching
what
our,
mentioned called what Yansong has mentioned is called Dongfeng landing site.
Yeah, Dongfeng
not the
landing site.
Sizhiwang banner landing site this
Yeah.
time. So this is
Dongfeng
the
landing
first
site
time we
is
use
at
that.
the Jiuquan Launch Center,
Exactly.
right?
And also it is very interesting that you know that this is Shenzhou 12 mission, the Shenzhou 13 mission, the Shenzhou 13 spaceship, and the
It's already
Long
there. I think it's already
March-2F
there.
Y13 will use as a backup for emergency rescue. So we will stand there in the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. So if the Shenzhou 12 can go back safely, it will use for the formal mission. But
right.
this will form a traditional procedure in the future that the next mission, the next spaceship and the launch vehicle will act as a rescue for the former ones.
And
It's
it
very-
is 7:15 a.m. Beijing time. We are a little bit more than 2 hours away from the final liftoff.
Yeah.
The rocket is scheduled to lift off at 9:22 Beijing time. But how is that launch window being chosen? I mean, how much error in time is considered acceptable? How much is not?
1 second.
1
The launch is called a zero launch window. The reason is that you know that our Tianhe 1 and the Tianzhou 2 combination is orbiting the Earth with a speed more than 7.8 kilometers per second, very fast. So the basic requirement for this Shenzhou 12 is to entering orbit with the same orbital plane. Okay, we heard from the chief commander announce some information. The only choice for us is that you know that the launch site is rotating together with the Earth. So every day there is a time that the launch site passing through the orbital plane of our Tianhe 1. So we can only launch our Shenzhou 12 at this moment. So that is the reason the launch
Every
window
second counts.
is restricted to 1 second, which we call the zero launch window. But there is another thing. You see that they can go into the same orbital plane, but usually when the Shenzhou spaceship come into the orbit, they are not usually in the same position. So usually we launch the Shenzhou spacecraft into an orbit with the same orbital plane as the Tianhe, but lower. With the lower orbit, it will rotate faster around surrounding the Earth. So it can, as a chasing vehicle, which become closer and closer, finally they can dock together.
So what about if we miss that window due to maybe
You
weather?
should need another day.
That would be another day.
Because you know that today we choose, as we mentioned, the fast rendezvous and docking, which take maybe only 6 hours.
Okay.
So theoretically, if we use 2-day rendezvous and docking before, we can launch every day. So that means we have a launch window every day for the 2 days interval. But for the 6 hours, maybe not every day. So if today's launch window is missed, we may choose another day. Maybe not tomorrow.
As you can see, they're putting on their seat belts on, and actually, this is a look inside the re-entry module of the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft. The room is quite limited.
Very
Not much-
narrow.
Yeah, not much room for the 3 astronauts.
As I mentioned, the total volume of the orbital module and the re-entry capsule is only 7 cubic meters.
You
So
see,
it's
he's
very,
using
very
his,
small.
his leg and foot to lift the book.
So how
That's
long
how-
does they have to stay in this tiny space before they docking?
during the whole launch.
After launch, maybe 6 hours.
6 hours.
per day.
So they have to stay in that tiny space for about
Exactly.
6 hours.
Because this is to the consideration is to go along with the international standard. You know that today the Soyuz spaceship usually uses faster rendezvous and docking, only 6 hours, 6.5 hours to the station. And today the progress even achieved 3 hours. From the launch to docking with the station, only 3 hours. So we also we tested this technology during the in 2017 during the Tianzhou 1 mission.
Yep.
After undocking, we simulated the fast rendezvous and docking from the Tianzhou 1 to the Tiangong 2 space laboratory. And also, you know that just 1 month before, our Tianzhou 2 cargo ship also adopted this fast rendezvous and docking. Only 8 hours from the launch to docking with the Tianhe 1 core module.
Yeah. And even though they have to stay in that tiny space for about 6 or 7 hours,
They will be very convenient.
They'll be very convenient.
Yeah.
But the whole flight process,
Yeah, exactly.
It
You
just
see
need to take like 10 minutes to take them to the orbit. It's very fast to get there. So which part of that period, during that period, which part is most unbearable or is make them most uncomfortable? At first
I believe
or in the middle?
During the working of the rocket. So as Yansong have mentioned, the bag will floating after they go into the orbit. But during the launch, there will be very violent vibration.
Okay.
So also the bag must be fixed there very tightly, not only floating in outer space. So they will also, the astronauts will experience the G load and also the vibration. They must be trained for this to adapt that. During their
And I
daily
still
training.
remember Mr. Yang Liwei mentioned that during his first flights to the outer space, that this kind of the vibration is making him feel very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, there is a what we call a pogo. Pogo is similar to the jerk of the car,
Yeah.
but 10 times greater.
Yeah.
So you don't feel very comfortable. It's not a smooth ride. It's the rocket that is shaking and in very low frequency.
And you can see Nie Haisheng holding this long stick. Well, right in front of them, where you cannot see, is a control panel where there are buttons on the control panel, and he's using that stick to, press on the buttons. And it's said that the buttons on the panel are usually bigger than the usual ones, and they are further apart because the astronauts will be wearing spacesuits and gloves. It's easier for them to use.
Yes, they have put on their gloves as you can see that they're testing all the communications, all the parameters, and as they are on the ground, they're taking full advantage of the time to check and recheck all the system with the ground crew before they disconnect from the ground and flight to outer space. So taking this full time to double check everything with the command center is very important at this moment.
And they also need to connect all the pipes on their spacesuit to the spacecraft, right? Oxygen supply, airflow,
Yes.
comm system, monitoring system.
Yes. As I mentioned, there is a pipe connecting the inside instruments to their spacesuits to provide ventilation and oxygen. And you know that because of the vibration I mentioned, so they must be fixed on the seat very tightly.
It is T minus 2 hours, 2 hours prior to
Exactly.
liftoff.
So at this stage, we use the power supply from the ground, not by the battery inside the. This is to save the energy of the batteries inside the spaceship, and also the same thing to the rocket carrier rocket. So only about several seconds before the launch, we just disconnect all the connectors, and then the power supply transfer from the ground to the vehicle itself. Just to save the energy,
Then
because
the
we
rocket is
only
on
have
its own.
limited amount of energy before the unfolding of the solar panels. So we must saving this energy. This is the same procedure for all spacecraft launch.
Yeah, and they have completed several drills already in the past couple of days, but this time, this is the real deal. I mean, the launch phase is the most dangerous phase of the whole flight, right? Because you have multi-metric tons of fuels burning every second. It's extremely risky, and that's a violent energy exchange. And
Think about you're sitting on the tons of toxic propellant.
More than 500 tons. More than 500 tons of propellants.
Yes.
The propellants for Long March-2F are UDMH, or unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrazine, and nitrogen tetroxide. The UDMH is highly toxic, and the NTO, or the nitrogen tetroxide, is highly corrosive.
That's right.
So it is very dangerous, but also have advantages. So they can be stored in room temperature.
Yes.
And so they can.
So we're not going to see any of that, the white gas that coming out of the
there is
tube,
no
I'm
the
sorry to
fueling
interrupt.
tube.
There is the level 4 retractable platform of the umbilical tower opening up. Soon you will.
We
Oh,
are-
there is the escape
I have
tower.
already I got the view of the escaping tower already. On
Looks
top
like
of the fairing.
Looks like a mini rocket. Well, I say it's mini, but it's 8 meters long. It's taller than me, but
Yeah.
compared to the Long March rocket, it's mini tiny.
It is the mini rockets, but with 6 solid motors.
3 motors. One is used for emergency escape. One is for the separation in normal cases.
That's
and
right.
one is for attitude control.
Oh,
Here's the close-up shot.
So there are multiple rotational platforms. You know that our launch complex is very reasonable, and also the launch complex in Wenchang also adopted a similar design. So you know that the rotational platforms can provide a closed space for the rocket and the spaceship complex. So that provides a very good condition for this vehicle. Even they will not be influenced by the rains or the sunstorms.
And the whole umbilical tower has 4 major segments. The one that's opening up is the top segment, level 4 segment. And after this, level 1 and level 2 segment closer to the ground will open, revealing the stage 1 and stage 2 rocket. And lastly, in the end, the third, level 3 segment will open, revealing the spacecraft. That's where the astronauts are staying right now.
we're talking about the rocket design. Some say that the Long March-2F is the 2.5 stages. Some
Exactly.
say it's 2 stages. What that means?
The half stage means the 4 boosters.
The side booster is
yes, exactly. The 4 boosters use the same engine as the first stage, but the first stage uses 4 engines.
Yeah.
But each booster only use 1 engine. Each have a thrust of 75 tons. So this is a configuration of the 4 boosters. The diameter of the booster is 2.25 meters, and the core stage has a diameter of 3.35 meters, as we mentioned. And also the second stage is shorter than the first stage, but also with the same diameter. It uses the engine is the same as the first stage, but it is a vacuum version, which means that the nozzle is bigger, and the what we call the specific impulse is higher than the first stage.
Yes.
So it will work much longer than the first stage. So that is the reason, because of the 4 boosters, we call it a 2.5 stage rocket.
Yes, the Long March-2F is going to be the vehicles to launch all of our 3 astronauts into China's space station, and this is the safest rocket so far in China, I think. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. So far, there are just 3 types of rockets that are qualified to launch human into space. The Russia's Soyuz that Mr. Yang mentioned, and China's Long March-2F, and SpaceX's Falcon 9.
Yeah.
With the current operational ones, yes.
Yeah.
Previously, we also have space shuttles, the Saturns, and many other that has been used.
So maybe this year or next year, the Atlas V will also carry the Starliner into space. If successful, it will be also another operational human-rated launch vehicle.
You know, that reminds me of a very interesting conversation between me and some of the rocket engineering. So, well, let's say we're going to have a business trip to Shanghai. You're going to book the air tickets. They didn't choose.
We're hearing a countdown. Do
Oh,
we
that's
know
a
what's that
rehearsal.
for?
That's
a
rehearsal.
It's a rehearsal.
Sorry, you were
Yeah,
saying?
you can book the air tickets, right? You can choose from whatever the Airbus 350 or the Boeing 737. You can pick up the type of the plane that you want to take on. And now, what? Let me ask you this, Choyang. If you were going to space,
I'd love to.
What type of the rocket are you going to pick up from the Long March family? There is about 10 rockets to choose.
Really? Isn't this the only one rocket that can carry men to space? The Long March-2F?
So far, it is. But are you going?
Then the Long March-2F it is.
I really wants to try the Long March 5. It's
that's the most
bigger. It's
powerful
probably more
The chubby 5.
comfortable. Yes.
But from our professional field, still we need much more improvement
Yes.
to change it to a human-rated launch vehicle. You know, in the Long March-2F, there is a very special system called a malfunction detection system.
Oh.
This is unique, not on the other launch vehicles. For this, if we can test anything wrong, because the software is very, very complex. It monitors everything, and if anything happened, will ignite the emergency escape system. As we mentioned, the reliability of this Long March-2F is 0.97. So that's not safe for astronauts. That means for 100 launch, there may be 3 missions threatens the safety of the astronauts. So we have another emergency escape system, including the emergency escape tower and also rocket engines on the payload fairing. With this help, we can raise the reliability to 0.997, which means for 1,000 launch, only 3 cases may threaten the safety of the astronauts. So that will be safe enough for the human beings. So that's the reason we call this a human-rated launch vehicle with the help of the malfunction detection system and the emergency escape system.
A very reliable rocket, I would say. But what other upgrades has the rocket been going through since its first launch in 1999?
Exactly. It is very interesting that, that Shenzhou 1 is not a formal model. It is an engineering model because that we want to check the Long March-2F rocket. So as Jensen has mentioned, during the Long March-5 launch, we tested the prototype of our new generation. So it is a similar thing happened to the Shenzhou 1. Usually the Shenzhou 1 is originally the engineering model, not prepared for formal flight. But during that mission, it's changed to we can recognize as a piggyback payload for the Long March-2F. But that's also a very successful mission.
As you can see, not much going on inside the re-entry module. Things are pretty static now. The 3 astronauts looking at their flight manual, going through some final status checks.
Yes, just several minutes before when we are talking, we heard the voice of the commanders. They just performed preliminary training, simulates the liftoff process. When we heard the sound, that's maybe the last simulation before the launch. We often see this kind of things during the launch of Shenzhou 7 and the Shenzhou 8 missions.
Less than 2 hours away from a final liftoff.
Even a Long March-2F is the most reliable rocket type so far. Well, Mr. Yang, you just mentioned it will be replaced by the Long March-7 in the future?
In the future, that's
Or are they going to use
new,
the same time?
The new generation of our our new generation spaceship has 2 versions. One for low Earth orbit missions,
Yes.
which has a mass about 13 to 14 tons, which can be launched by Long March-7. So that spaceship can bring 6 astronauts into our Tiangong space station. Maybe in the future we can do this. And also, as I mentioned, another version we'll use for the potential human missions to the moon, but need a bigger rocket.
So what Yang is talking about is a new generation capsule, larger than the Shenzhou capsule, capable of sending 6 at the same time. So this one is 3 per time. So in the future we have a larger crewed capsule.
There you see the escape tower right there. I mean, this kind of board system is usually controlled by a combination of automatic rocket failure detection, like Professor Yang just mentioned, and also a manual activation for crew commanders to use. But there is also another type of a board system, the good old ejection seat, like used in the military aircraft.
In this case, there is another task for the ground staff. After the closing the hatch of the orbital module, they also have a panel to seal the payload fairing. After this, if anything wrong happens, they must use the emergency escape system, even if it is still stand on the launch pad. Yes. So as I mentioned, the same thing happened during 1980s when the former Soviet want to send a spacecraft to the Salyut 7 space station. There is something wrong happened to the rocket. So the emergency escape just takes the ship out from the rocket and safely landed several kilometers away. I can still remember the astronauts. Later, he joined the mission in the Mir station and stayed there for 1 year.
So you can see the opening of the umbilical hatch, because once you arm the escape tower, you have to clear the way. So that's probably one signal that they have armed the escape tower, and it's ready for that escape tower to work.
And I also learned that these astronauts have to also get trained underwater, right? What's that for?
To simulate
to simulate the micro gravity environment, because this time the mission is more challenging. It's not just staying inside the capsule or just do a space flight or just wave flags. They have to go literally outside the space station and to work on the robotic arms. So that is more challenging.
What you mentioned is called the neutral buoyancy pool, which have just put some salt in the water to have to balance the mass, the gravity, and also the float. So the situation, the feeling of the astronaut will very similar to when they perform in EVA. So you can see that it is a very large pool in the space city.
That's right.
In the astronaut center. So our space station simulator is already in the pool.
Yeah.
I can still remember during an introduction on Central CCTV, Miss Wang Yaping just showed her training inside the water. And because that the space suit is for everyone, so the boot is a little big. So she must feel something inside, because her feet is smaller than the male astronauts.
Well, it's the underwater training is the only way that we can simulate this microgravity environment on the Earth.
Well, yes, there are a couple of other ways, but it's not as good and exact as the mutual buoyancy. You use some of the springs to lift to simulate the microgravity environment, but that's not realistic as you're in the water. So everything is like floating, and it's like outer space environment. So they have to perform a lot of tasks, either attached to robotic arms or outside of the station. So they have to use all the tools, and the tools has to be also attached with strings and many other things otherwise it will float off. Yeah. So all of this needs a detailed training, and this requires the swimming pool. So that's why a lot of astronauts end up retiring diving. So they go to diving resorts. If you try to find former astronauts, they would be.
They get used to that kind of environment.
They're once either in an exotic diving place or on the way to it.
Yes.
The underwater training is very challenging and very tough. After training, they were so tired that they can even take a They can very hard to take their chopstick to have their dinner. So they will be very tired after training. But this kind of training comes from the Gemini missions in the US. That the Gemini missions performed several EVA during their whole flight missions, but most of them are not very successful. Only the last one, the Gemini 12 mission, Dr. Buzz Aldrin performed a very, very successful EVA. The reason is that he is a fan of scuba diving, so he has
that really
used
helped.
to it. Yeah, so this helped him. So when he comes to China, I suggest him to go to Sanya and experience the scuba diving there.
Mr. Yang, you just mentioned about Mir Station that I think that belongs to Russia, right? And I think this mission today was the first time since May 2000 that two orbiting space stations will be simultaneously inhabited in space. And last time it was the Mir Station and ISS.
Actually speaking, yes. That the first module, the Zaya module of the International Space Station, was launched in 1998. Well, at that moment, the Mir station were not deorbited, which was deorbited in 2001.
2001 is
but
decommissioned.
At that moment, it's already been unmanned. Because that its working period is much longer than the design period. So at that moment, it is already not feasible for astronauts to stay inside. So they don't have a choice but to deorbit the Mir station.
In the final couple of years of Mir was not inhabited, but there was also an international community tried to bring the Mir and maintain the Mir in orbit as on a commercial basis, but they didn't do that. Because of the safety concerns. So it has to be deorbited and combusted and consumed in the re-entry process.
And you're now watching the live picture of the orbital module of the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft. Engineers are doing their final status checks. They're communicating with the astronauts.
Yes. The next step will be closing the hatch between the re-entry capsule and the orbital module. You see, this is a video, a camera mounted on the inside of the orbital module. We can still see the hatch on the left side. Finally, the ground staff will close the hatch.
And after that, they will close the door of the orbital module, the fairing.
The side hatch, yes.
Is there any chance that the Tiangong space station, that the astronauts on Tiangong space station can meet or say hello to the ISS astronauts at this time?
They were in the different orbit. You know that the inclination or the angle between the orbital plane and the equatorial plane of our station is 41.2 degrees, while the International Space Station, the inclination is 51.6 degrees. So they are different. They were, although a similar altitude, about 400 kilometers, but they are orbiting the Earth with a different orbit, so they cannot meet.
Okay.
All three
collision
astronauts strapped in
Yeah.
as we speak. And we've noticed that these astronauts are in their 50s, 40s. Nie Haisheng is the oldest of all. I mean, he's turning 57 this year. A lot of people do retire by the age of 55 or age of 60, and they are still going to space, and that is awesome.
Yes. Or are they too old to carry out this mission?
Would that be a concern?
Well, they were trained many times for this.
So once you're in microgravity environment, the muscle doesn't work so hard. I mean, it's the mental, it's the
That won't
knowledge.
bother them.
Yeah, the knowledge that brings everything together. And you have robotic arms outside the station. You have all the mechanical things, and you have microgravity environment. And I think there are also astronauts that over 60. In the U.S. and other countries are still performing well in outer space. So it's a physical fitness that's very important.
So there's no standard.
There's no standard.
No standard for the age of the astronaut.
Even though we are considering future to send scientists to outer space,
Yes.
because that's more fitted for the experiments.
But other than that, there are certain selection criteria for astronauts, right? They have to
There
be of
are.
a certain height. They need to have a degree. They need to pass certain physical and psychological tests, like you mentioned, Mr. Xu.
Their height usually limited for astronauts, usually limited to 1.72 meter.
So they're conducting the final check before they close the hatch, and they have already removed the plate to slide the astronauts in.
The ground staff is preparing for the closing the hatch.
All right, a major move coming up. The engineer is about to close the hatch connecting the orbital module. You're now watching our special coverage of Shenzhou 12th mission, and Doni is here with a look of the other news making headlines around the world. Doni?
Indeed, well, you have a very nice module there on the desk, and since Shenzhou's 12 is still on the Earth, and so are we, so let's take a look at what's going around in the world. A day-long summit in Geneva between the presidents of Russia and the United States wrapped up early on Wednesday, and on the agenda was everything from cybersecurity and human rights to the environment. Although both agreed progress was made over diplomats returning to their posts, stark differences still remain over a host of other issues, including China. Now, Tony Waterman has more from Geneva.
President Biden struck a realistic but optimistic tone at the end of this meeting. He said his talks with the Russian president were good, that they were positive, and that there were no threats issues. This is really echoing what we heard from Mr. Putin himself, who called these talks constructive. This is notable because even until the very last moments, there was concerns that there would be a lot of animosity in the room when these two presidents met, because there was a lot of tough issues that needed to be addressed. But at the end of the day, they were able to reach agreement on a few issues, most notably on cybersecurity. They're going to put together working groups to discuss this issue of making the internet safer from hackers. Of course, a big issue for the United States, which has concerns over election meddling, also a series of attacks on vital infrastructure in the United States. And President Biden said that he did present President Putin with a list of 16 critical pieces of infrastructure that he believes should be off limits. Now they have to find some common ground on that list. They also made some progress on a new arms control agreement. They are going to have discussions on the New START treaty. This is something that was just renewed in February for 5 years. Perhaps they will expand that to include new types of emerging weaponry or new types of emerging technology that can be used in warfare. They also agreed to return ambassadors to each other's countries.
I did what I came to do. Number one, identify areas of practical work our two countries can do to advance our mutual interest and also benefit the world.
So a little bit of progress made, but when President Biden was asked whether he believed that Putin would change his behavior, he said he was not confident. The real test, he said, is going to come in the next 3 to 6 months to see how things progress, see how these conversations progress, and also see how Russia acts towards the United States. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Geneva.
Now, a Palestinian woman was shot dead in the West Bank today after attempting to ram Israeli soldiers with her car and attack them with a knife. And earlier, Israel and Palestine had conducted their first round of exchange of attacks since a ceasefire ended 11 days of deadly fighting last month. Israeli aircraft struck Gaza today in response to incendiary balloons launched from the Palestinian enclave. And Hamas' initial attacks from Gaza on Tuesday occurred a few hours before a march by far-right Jewish nationalists took place in East Jerusalem. And the rally celebrated Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem in 1967. Stephanie Fried has more from Tel Aviv.
The biggest sign of escalation that we saw would have been certainly the hours leading into the march that you mentioned on Tuesday, and then while the march was happening, because Hamas in Gaza had said that if the march were to proceed, they were threatening they were going to fire rockets on Israel, and that would have threatened to immediately escalate the situation pretty much back to where it was earlier in the month, 3 weeks ago, when a ceasefire, before a ceasefire was declared between the sides. But the march was slightly rerouted. Police by the thousands were there securing the people who were marching, trying to keep the Palestinians and those nationalist flag-waving people actually screaming things like death to Arabs and we'll burn down your villages. Police were trying to keep them apart from Palestinians. For the most part, they did. Dozens of Palestinians were injured in clashes, and as you noted, dozens of incendiary balloons were floated across from Gaza into southern Israel. That broke one of the agreements of the ceasefire that the sides had agreed to several weeks ago. And so Israel's government, newest government, said that they were trying to de-escalate the situation in general around that march, but that they would respond, and we saw that their response, airstrikes on Gaza, happened overnight Tuesday.
All right, China has slammed the U.S. and the European Union for accusing Beijing of economic coercion and launching disinformation campaigns.
美欧峰会声明
The EU-US summit statement goes far beyond the scope of the normal development of bilateral relations. It unreasonably interferes in China's internal affairs and creates and spreads false information. China expressed strong dissatisfaction and is firmly opposed to it. What the US and EU should do is to reflect on their own serious problems.
Japanese media are reporting that Tokyo Olympics organizers are considering a proposal to limit spectators to 10,000 at major events. And foreign spectators are already banned, and Japan will decide this month on whether to allow domestic spectators. And organizers say they will take proper coronavirus measures to ensure the safety of the games, but calls are growing in Japan for them to be cancelled. The Olympics have been already delayed for a year due to the pandemic and are expected to kick off on July the 23rd. And France is easing several coronavirus restrictions. It's no longer mandatory to wear masks outdoors from Thursday, and it will halt an 8-month nightly curfew this weekend. It comes as the government extends its vaccination campaign to include more young people. Ross Cullen reports.
Another milestone for the COVID-19 vaccination campaign in France. Children getting their coronavirus shots for the first time. The move is being strictly controlled. Vaccinations can only be given with the child's consent, their parents' oral and written consent, and if the jab takes place in the presence of the child's parents.
C'est pas trop tôt, et c'est pas trop tard.
It's not too early nor too late. I think it's good. I am myself vaccinated. Maybe my son is immune, but I think it is good. We have a pass to travel now. This could be a pass to get back to almost normal and be more serene. If my son wants to get vaccinated, I am all for it.
I think it's a good thing, and as soon as I can get vaccinated, I will do it. That would reassure me, and I'll be able to do more things.
France has gone from the problems of the sluggish rollout of vaccines at the start of the year to being one of the first countries to offer jabs to children.
We saw some teenagers who want to be vaccinated with the understanding that they would like their college or their high school to not be closed next year. They also want to be able to go on holiday more freely. And several spoke spontaneously about collective immunity.
All those youngsters who do receive a dose will get the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which was approved by Europe's drugs regulator last month for use in 12 to 15-year-olds.
The government wants to continue to drive uptake of the vaccine across the population to try to mirror the unlocking strategy and to combat the clusters of the Delta variant we are starting to see here.
As France progressively expands its vaccination campaign, it's also progressively lifting the remaining restrictions in place, hoping for a safe, successful summer season without a subsequent surge in cases in September. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
And Chu and Yangzhou, there is no need to worry about wearing a mask inside the Shenzhou 12 or not. All right, thank you very much. That's all from me.
Thanks so much, Dongning. And you're now watching our special coverage of the Shenzhou 12 mission. It is 7:51 Beijing time. We are about 1.5 hours till liftoff. So let's talk more about this mission. Let's talk about life in space. I mean, what kind of impact will it have for the astronauts living in space for 3 months, the long duration?
Well, this is also a new challenge for our astronauts. You know that stay in space, if you stay there for only 1 month, comparing with 3 months is a different matter. As we have already discussed, with the microgravity environment, you will have the weakening or attenuation of your muscles, and also with the loss of bones. So not only they must have a very good nutrition, the food must be carefully designed. We have more than 120 types of food for the astronauts for the three months of living. And also they must have all kinds of exercises. For instance, they have treadmill and also have a bicycle and also have other things for everyday exercises, physical exercises. So this will be part of their work before their rest time and besides their working time.
There you see the countdown clock, T-minus 1.5 hours. The launch tower is on your left of the screen, and you're getting a visual of the control center and also inside the re-entry module. So you mentioned, Professor Yang, the food is quite good, but do they get to choose their meal plan? Or it's assigned?
It is designed, but they also have their freedom to choose. You know that besides their formal meal and dinner, there are also some food for you know that they have some such as the cakes, such as the ice cream, and so on.
That's not so bad.
And chocolate.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, well, they would taste different from space.
Yeah.
How so?
Because of the microgravity environment, your body changes. Your tongue swollen, and your blood pressure changes, and your taste is different. Even in aviation food, I mean, food on the ground and in the air would taste different, heavy.
So in that case, what's been done on the front of managing their health? I mean, health management for the crew.
Well, they have to do exercise on a daily basis. It's part of the routine to maintain the muscle mass and cardiovascular circular system, because in microgravity environment, even the blood flows. It's not like floating according to your gravity on Earth, and you have more blood on the foot or something. But everything changes. But the advantage of living in outer space for 3 months is that there was a U.S. astronaut. He said he lived in outer space for quite a long time, and he went for a foot massage, and the massager said the foot is so tender because he never used that foot for.
But
for walking.
other than working out, other than working in space, do they have any entertainment activities? I mean, do they have off days?
Well, the very first thing they have is to have microgravity environment, that everything floats. Even if you drink, you can squeeze the water ball out and they can float to you. Not you have to use your neck to drink the water. So you have just to open your mouth, and there are many things to see on the orbiters. You can look out of the window and see beautiful Earth, climate change all the time, and cloud covering and oceans. And you can see a lot of the stars. In outer space, there's no atmosphere, so you see the galaxy more clearly.
Yeah.
So there are many things to do on board. And then you can receive emails and communication with the ground crews. And they're also install some education programs that you teach the crowd, the young generations. So you can always hear some of the communications on the background. Is still double checking the system workings, in particular for the TTNC systems. Once the rocket launched, we have to keep a 24/7 eye on the capsule. So make sure that everything goes well. So they have to do all the checkings and double checks, and you can see the veterans and the astronauts. They're in a relaxed position. Their leg are not folded as for the landing purpose, because the position they're sitting is like a baby sitting position that can tolerate the maximum G-force that they can experience. So they have to sit in a particular designed seat in the right position.
I'm hearing words. I'm sorry. I'm hearing words that our correspondent Ning Hong is with us now. He is very near the launch site. Ning Hong, if you're with me, what are you seeing now? What are you hearing now?
Hello. Well, we're now on the rooftop of a building that's about 1.5 kilometers away from the launch pad. You can see that launch pad there is very close, and this is the closest location that you could get while watching the launch. And we're now about still over 1 hour before the launch, and you can see the rocket is still covered by the rotating support platform. But from afar, you can see there's a pointing head above the launch pad. That is the abortion tower that you could see. And now the 3 astronauts are inside the capsule, and also we've just learned that the gate of the orbiter has closed. So it means that all the checks of the astronauts has completed. And as we're approaching the 1 hour countdown, the all system will go through another round of check. This will be a overall check about the conditions of the rocket, about the spaceship, and also about the entire launch field. And then you will see that these launch pads will open one by one until you can see the entire rocket. And as we're approaching a 30 minutes countdown, you could the people working on the launch pad will begin to evacuate. It will take them about 15 minutes to evacuate. And the last group of people working on the launch pad will evacuate in the 15 minutes countdown, and then we'll be expecting the launch very soon. And you can see that this is a very ideal weather, clear weather with minor wind. So yeah, we're all expecting this in very soon.
All right, thanks so much, Ning Hong. Good to talk to you. Keep in touch. You're our eyes on the ground now.
And now joining us in the studio through the live is Dr. Tricia LaRose. She's the PI and the leading scientist for Tumors in Space program with the University of Oslo in Norway. Now, welcome.
Greetings,
Hello.
Beijing from Norway.
Hello, Dr. LaRose. Very happy to talk to you. Well, the last time we talked about your program, back to the end of April, we talked about when China launches the core module of the space station. So tell us more about your program. Why is the microgravity environment in the outer space so important for the cancer research? And when and how did you and your team first realize that space might be a greater place to study tumors than on Earth?
Well, let's start with your second question. I was a researcher at the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the specialized cancer agency of the World Health Organization. In fact, China is a newly minted member state of IARC-WHO. So hopefully we'll have more cancer research in space coming out of China very soon. But while I was at IARC, I had the idea to look for mutational signatures based on cosmic radiation. And when we get these interesting scientific ideas, the first thing we do is head into the literature to see what has been done before. And I found a groundbreaking paper from a group of Chinese scientists who in fact sent cervical cancer cells on a Shenzhou 4 mission. And they found, and they were the first team to find this, they found that the microgravity environment can switch our genes on and off, gene expression. And that gene expression may be linked to slowing or stopping the growth of cancer. And so this was really a seminal piece of evidence coming out of China on a Shenzhou 4 mission that led us to put together a fuller cancer research profile, which is tumors in space.
Well, Dr. LaRose, your program has been selected as one of the 9 science experiments on board of China space stations. How will you carry out, how exactly will you carry out this experiments on the space station? Will you need...
Exactly.
Yeah, and will you need the astronauts to help you out this? And will you need to train them how to manipulate this?
I'm laughing because a research portfolio like this takes years to develop. So how exactly we'll do it, we're still figuring that out. But we are sending organoids to space, and these are very different than anything that's been done before. We're actually taking real tumors from cancer patients. So they're 3-dimensional tumor tissue, and we're sending that to space. It's the first time it's ever been done. But because we're doing something so new, we actually have to build the hardware, the spaceflight hardware, to hold our experiment right from scratch. And so we plan to have this experiment fully automated, but certainly the astronauts will need to be familiar with the experiment, need to understand the hardware, step in case something goes wrong with the hardware and it needs to be fixed. And as I heard in your earlier conversation, we have some veterans that are on the launch pad right now, and most certainly I'll have all the help I need from the crew once Tumors in Space finally does launch.
Dr. LaRose, have you ever carried out this experiments in the previously on other spacecraft or in outer space?
In fact, no. And one of the very important criteria for selecting experiments on the China space station is that they had to be completely novel, never been done before. And so Tumors in Space, how we've designed the experiment, how we'll carry the experiment out is completely new. So no, we haven't done this anywhere else. And 31 days on the China space station will be quite an achievement for us.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. LaRose. Good luck, and I know I appreciate that your involvement in our show, because I know it's been very, very late back there in Oslo. So take some rest. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doc. All right, we're getting back to the live picture of the umbilical tower on your left, and on your right is the live picture of the re-entry capsule where the 3 astronauts are strapped in. I guess a major move coming up is the closing of the hatch of the space capsule, right? Is that so, Professor
Yes,
Yang?
I believe that the next step will be closing all the hatches, either the one between the orbital module and the re-entry capsule, and also the side hatch of the orbital module. And then, as I mentioned, the panel on the payload fairing must be all closed. So you can see now it is still there are ground staff checking just near the payload fairing on the top left camera.
what exactly are they checking? Is this for air tightness?
Yes, they must check the airtight sealing of the hatch. So not only the hatch between the orbital module and the re-entry capsule must be checked, also the orbital module, the side hatch must be checked.
So you can see from the top right, the hatch between the service module and the capsule has been closed. So, and also the ground crew has left also the service module. So they're outside of the service module, having final check with the service module sealing and hatch systems before they close that door, and also attach a fairing to it.
Yeah, we're getting really close to liftoff. We are less than 1 hour and 20 minutes away.
Yep.
The astronauts strapped in, not much going on there in the capsule. What do you think they are going through their minds right now?
Well, compared to the previous stage, that when those astronauts are so busy to get everything ready, so now I think they're taking rest.
Well, I think they have done this thousands of times on the ground. I mean, preparing for takeoff. It's part of the drill. Probably they're still feeling, I mean, mentally they're in the drill, or they think they didn't know this is the real McCoy. So they're waiting for the thing to happen.
And actually, most of the procedure are actually manipulated by the people on the ground, right?
Yes, many times, if not once. I mean, they have trained this many times, and they have teamed up and did this preparation for takeoff many times. And all the procedure has to be followed, if not 10 times, hundreds of times, and they know the drill.
Yes.
Some foreign astronauts mentioned that the drill is so real that usually sometimes happens that they cannot distinguish the drill and the real launch. And also, from the previous video, we can see the ground staff outside the payload fairing. It is very interesting that the payload fairing is not, all the fairing is not made of metal, because some are used for other material. Because we have the telemetry data emitted from the spacecraft, so we need a window. We can the microwave can penetrate the window, and the ground stations can receive these signals to check if everything is okay.
All right. The drill is so important because there are so many instruments and gadgets on board of the space station. There's over, I think it's over 1,200 instruments just in the core module of that. So what about, how could they prevent, how could we prevent those astronauts from, mistakenly touching some button and make the disaster?
Usually, you see that besides the control panels, which can be operated by the astronauts, we also have telemetry data from all instruments, no exception. So we have we're monitoring the status of every instrument.
Oh, there you see, they are closing the hatch.
Yes,
the hatch.
The payload fairing. The ground staff are just sealing the panel on the payload fairing.
They're sealing the hatch now.
So after this moment, if anything wrong happens, they will use the emergency escape system.
Now they cannot just get out of this door by themselves.
How effective is that escape tower? Has that been ever tested with human?
This what you mentioned, the things that happened during the missions of the former Soviet Union. Never happened in China.
China's space mission.
Yeah. They do rescue the lives of some astronauts. Even just maybe the year before last, during the launch of the Soyuz MS-10, because during the separation of the boosters, one of the boosters collided with the core stage. So this is a very serious malfunction, and the emergency escape worked. So the two astronauts, one from Russia and one from U.S., were escaped from the rocket and have an emergency landing. So that's happened just in recent years.
But we have to mention that the Long March-2F is a very reliable rocket. It has a very good tracking record. It has launched 14 times with 14 successful launches and 0 failures. So overall, the reliability is quite good there.
But the Long March-2F is still using a toxic propellant, as you just mentioned. That
exactly
is,
toxic and corrosive.
Why can they just change into the more environment friendly propellant?
As we have discussed,
the
Long March-7 has a potential capability to become a human-rated launch vehicle, but we still need some improvement. For instance, we should add the malfunction detection system and also the emergency escape system to this rocket. So if that improvement has been done, it can be used as a human-rated launch vehicle to launch, as we discussed, the new generation spaceship, to launch 6 to 7 astronauts to our station.
I think the simple answer is safety. It's more safe to use the conventional fuel because the number of times you flow, the Long March has flown more than 300 times. It's a reliable engine. New generations are new engines. So it's full reliability that we use the conventional fuel to increase the safety of the launch vehicle.
And we're hearing something going on in the comm system. What do you think they are going through right now? What kind of
the chief commander, that's the launch is not only a task of the launch vehicle and the spaceship, but a huge system, including the launch site system, the telemetry and the tracking system, and other systems. So the chief commander must check if everything is okay, including the space tracking ships and the rescue teams. You know that during the launch, if some emergency case happened, we also have rescue teams along the downrange of the rocket and also even in the sea. We have a rescue fleet. So in some cases, maybe the spaceship will splash down in the Yellow Sea. So we have a rescue team. So they must also be checked. Their status is okay for the launch. And also the weather condition, the wind is also a very considerable factor to decide whether we should perform the launch or not.
So these tracking teams, they're all over the country, right? In Beijing?
Not all the country, but just along the downrange of the rocket, the ground track. And also we have a space tracking.
Water. There's a spaceship. There's a vessel in the water tracking.
Exactly, the rescue fleet. A rescue fleet. And also we have space tracking ship, the Yuanwang space tracking ship. At some critical point, you know that today the Tianhe data really satellite have a 100% coverage for all the flights of the Shenzhou spaceship. But still, in some critical point, we need some ground support, such as the ground stations in Weinan, in Qingdao, along the track of the Long March-2F. And during the separation of the Shenzhou spaceship and the end stage, we also have Yuanwang space tracking ship to monitoring and also gather data, such as the videos from the cameras mounted on the spacecraft.
Well, tell us more about the relay satellites, what we need to Tianhe relay satellites, and I think many other countries are still using their own relay satellites to establish this kind of communication between the spacecraft, the people on the spacecraft, and the ground controller. So why we need that kind of a satellite? How does it work?
Even with the help of our stations outside China, in other countries, the coverage of the T-minus 2 hours countdown. So still some check-ins were performing.
They're still collecting the data.
Yes, exactly.
We're actually about a little more than 1 hour to go. It's T-minus 1 hour and 9 minutes. That's the countdown clock from the control team.
Yeah, they're just still collecting the data from 2 hours ago and to make some analysis.
So the commander is asking different part of the mission, different system, if they are in okay.
And once the astronauts are up there, how will the waste be managed?
Yes, it will be put it back to the cargo ship.
Oh, and then?
And then it will be dropped back to Earth and disintegrate during the re-entry process.
And about space debris, what's been done to manage those?
Oh yes, you ask a very good question. I mean, Professor Yang mentioned there what we call system engineering. There are 7 or 8 systems that we combine into one mission. He mentioned about the ground launch site. That's one system.
Yep.
Fuelings and everything. And TTNC, that's another system for communications and trackings. Life support is one system. Launch vehicle is a system. and space station is one system. So when you talk about space debris, there are more than 100,000 registered space debris in outer space that's circling at a very high velocity. And we have to build a model of this space debris, their orbit, their size, and their speed, so that to avoid the whole process of launching and docking and rendezvous to meet up with the space debris. And sometimes we have to conduct maneuvers to avoid the space debris if it's a passive one. So space debris is one major issue, a major concern of the manned missions. So we have modulated already all of space debris, and we're working with the international community to manage the space debris. And in the future, we also came up with the idea of space traffic management, where you have all the spacecraft operated by different operators, like, for example, Starlink. They have tens of thousands of satellites.
Yeah.
And that also causes concern in the future. You know, whether you have a very crowded outer space, and for human activity is very dangerous. And we can see a lot of movies like Gravities, that the space station was destroyed by space debris. So that is not a threat. That's a real threat. It's not just speculations. So space debris is very important for human missions.
And one of our missions this time for the space station is to verify the robotic arms of that has been equipped on the space missions to core module. And how can we use the robotic arms? Can we use that to defend some of that, flying?
No. Because you know that's the relative velocity or the combined velocity between the debris and spacecraft is more than several kilometers per second. So you cannot have the reaction time. The only thing you can do, as Haisheng has mentioned, is to have just a prediction and evaluate the probability of the collision. And then if we have a threshold, if the probability comes higher than the threshold, we will have an orbit maneuver to avoid the collision between our spacecraft and the debris. And today, the reduction of the debris is a very big issue in our space field. For instance, for the rocket, the end stage, we will do a lot of special procedures. For instance, we must leak off all the remaining propellants, and then we discharge all the electricity inside the batteries, and also release all the gas in the high pressure tanks. All these things we do is to avoid the explosion of the end stage in the orbit, to avoid the production of more debris. So we've already done this. This has become a very common and routinary procedure for all carrier rockets. And also, as Haisheng had mentioned, the rubbish and the waste we put inside the Tianhe 2 cargo ship. After its mission, it will be deorbited and re-entry in the South Pacific Ocean. We have an area in this South Pacific with the diameter more than 2,000 kilometers. There even no any island in this area.
Yeah.
So it's very safe. No one will be harmed during the re-entry. Because either the Tianhe spaceship and other things we should perform this controlled re-entry is too big, and the debris cannot be burned out during the process. So maybe some pieces will drop onto the ocean surface.
That's right.
It's very important you mentioned that, because there are concerns from people that these...
In the beginning of the May, some articles are talking about a re-entry of the Long March-2F's core stage. That coming back, they use the words uncontrolled re-entry. What do you think of that?
That's not a big problem. You see that although the core stage, yes, it's very big, but you know that it's not made for thermal protection. So all the parts, more than 90%, will be burned out during the re-entry. Only some very, very small parts, for instance, some of the nozzles of the rocket engines, maybe that can have a very high thermal protection with resist the high temperature during the re-entry. But these are only very small parts. The other thing is the coverage. You know that the probability of landing, hitting something on the ground, the possibility is very low. You know that more than 70% of the ocean, of the Earth's surface is covered by the oceans, yes. And even on the land, only a small portion is populated. So it is not very serious. Usually, no one will be harmed during this re-entry.
What do you think, Mr. Xu?
Well, I think it was a common practice in the international community, in particularly in the space sector.
That's right.
That we use passivation technology.
And especially for the insider of the space to know this is going to happen.
Yeah, we know that the final stage is going to be burned up in outer space during the re-entry. But this one is particularly bigger.
Yeah.
Bigger cause concern, but bigger.
5 meters diameter.
5 meter and about 20 metric tons. But that also used materials like aluminiums that can easily burn up during the re-entry process. It was a common practice not to control the final. It's part of the rocket. It's not the space objects. So it's the final stage of the rocket. We do passivations in case of fragmentation in our orbit. Creating more orbits, space debris. But during re-entry, we normally don't control. But in the coming missions, for the 2 extended arms of the Chinese mission, we are doing some improvement so that we have more or less a controlled re-entry to the designated areas rather than uncontrolled completely.
Here's another question about living in space. It's going to be a 3-bedroom suite for them, right? Up there in the space station with one bathroom.
No, it's going to be just 3 sleeping bags.
Oh, how will they take showers then?
Oh, shower and bathroom, they're going to use that same facility. There's no actual showers that you can experience in outer space, just the sponges, yes.
Just sponge bath.
Just use towels to rub their skin. This is more efficient, saving the water. You know that they do have a shower during the Skylab missions, but not very usually it's recognized as a waste of water. So during the missions after the Skylab one, no this kind of things happened. So just use the towel to rub your skin. And that's already good enough for cleaning.
I mean, everything is so different when you're in space. Even working out is different. You mentioned there will be treadmills, there will be space bikes, but it's going to be different, right? Doing it.
It's a little bit different for the
you're
training.
floating in
and
a
also,
microgravity
yes,
environment.
usually they have a so-called penguin suits. The penguin suits have some pressure on your body to force your blood to go downside. So as Nie Haisheng had mentioned, your tongue will feel very different because of that the redistribution of your blood on your body because you know that in our daily life we are on the ground influenced by the gravity. So we
don't even notice that.
Our cardiovascular system has the mechanism to make the blood go upside. But without the gravity, still this works to make the redistribution of your blood to upward. So you will feel something different.
So what does the penguin suit, the Tianhe you mentioned, do to your body? Does it?
So it has negative pressure. Negative pressure on your legs. So it will redistribute, force the blood to go downside, like on the Earth. But that's not very convenient. So they will not wear this suit in all the time.
All right, you're now watching CGTN's special coverage of China's Shenzhou 12-man mission. This is the 1-hour countdown, 1 hour left before the launch of the spacecraft. Crew members have already entered the capsule, and in final preparations, there you have the ground command. T-minus 59 minutes 44 seconds, getting extremely close to liftoff.
And there's going to be another mission. It's a skywalk. I think so. Mr. Liu is going to walk outside of the capsule, and why they need, but I've been told that the 3 astronauts need to work together to carry out this spacewalk, right?
Yes, that this time is quite different from our Shenzhou 7 mission. This time we have a robotic arm. So Mr. Liu Boming also mentioned yesterday during the news release conference.
That's right.
So the robotic arm can move along this core module, and in some cases it will help the astronaut. So the astronaut will stand on one end of the robotic arm after they go outside the hatch. So the robotic arm can, but it should be operated by 1 astronaut inside. So 2 astronauts go outside for the EVA, 1 stay inside to operate the robotic arm and move to the right place for them.
So what they're going to use the robotic arms to? They're going to move what?
Yes, it can. So the robotic arm have different mechanism on the top. Some can fix the feet of the astronauts. Some can also fix on some adapters along the station. So there are multiple adapters along the Tianhe 1, and the robotic arm have the similar adapter on both ends. So if one end connected to an adapter, the other end can move to another one, and then one by one just move along the surface of the station.
And some of the equipments are external. You have to go outside to fix and to mount.
Exactly.
And there's also a construction of the station that you need the robotic arm to work to move the segments from the front docking position to the permanent location. So all of these need robotic arm to work. And external EVA with robotic will be more efficient rather than just holding with your hand.
The China Manned Space Agency has already announced the standard interface outside the station. So including those in foreign countries, if they want to perform an experiment on China station outside the station, they must follow these standards. So with this standard, it can help these applicants to making their instruments, and then it will be brought by the cargo ship to our station, then put outside the station. Maybe, as Yan Song had mentioned, by a EVA of the astronauts, mount these instruments outside the station.
But before those tasks can happen, they're going to have to perform rendezvous and docking with the Tianhe core module, right? But when will Shenzhou 12 dock with Tianhe? I mean, there's not much information about it in the press conference
After
yesterday.
this launch, maybe 6 hours or so, the Shenzhou 12 will rendezvous and dock. It has two phases: the long distance, the long range guidance, and the short range. So the long range guidance will from several thousand kilometers to about 52 kilometers away from the station, and then it will dock automatically to the station.
All right, and during the launching process, ensuring the safety of the astronauts is a top priority. There's a crucial part of the capsule that can protect the astronauts if anything goes wrong. And our Nie Haisheng is with us. Less than 1 hour to go, Nie Haisheng, what is the mood like there?
Well, now we're in the 1 hour countdown, and there's a loudspeaker here on this rooftop that broadcasting on and on, telling people in this launch field about the progress of the system check that is going on. And from what we know, that all system is in good condition. And we can see that there are 4 levels of rotating platform. But currently, only the top level has opened, revealing a pointing head of the rocket. That is the abort tower, which is prepared for a very unique feature for rockets that carry the manned spaceships, because its function is to, in time of emergency, to help astronauts to escape from the rocket. And in 3 seconds, this abort tower will bring the astronauts away from the launch pad to a place where about 1.5 kilometers away, and then the parachutes will open and the astronauts will safely land. That's prepared for in time of emergency, while the abort tower will be functional between 900 seconds before the launch and 120 seconds after the launch while the rocket is lifting off. And also, what we're expecting here is that these rotating platforms will open one by one. And a new update is that people helping to maintain the manned spaceship has left the launch pad, which means that while all preparations inside the spacecraft Shenzhou 12 has completed, and now the astronauts could communicate with all systems independently. And also, what we are expecting now is that we're approaching 30 minutes countdown. Then people now working at the launch pad will begin to evacuate, and it will take them about 15 minutes to complete evacuation. And then they will start. It will enter the ignition phase. And we are expecting this moment because it is really an honor to be here to witness the history. And from this moment on, there will be astronauts heading out from this launch site, routinely heading for China's space station, which is a really, really good progress.
Yeah, that's the moment we've been waiting for, entering a new era, the space station era, isn't it? Thanks so much, Nie Haisheng, joining us live on the launch site.
Well, talk about a skywalk, Mr. Yan. I think, well, those astronauts been harmed by the cosmic radiation? I mean, the radiation belt was just 600 kilometers above the ground, which just means it's just 200 kilometers higher than their orbits. And, and that radiation belt is not evenly distributed. And some parts of that belt has been fallen down, probably has been drowning into the orbit where the Tianhe is orbiting.
You are correct, but you know that the EVA usually performs at most maybe 5 to 6 hours. So although, as you mentioned, the South Pacific region, the South Atlantic Ocean, has an abnormal distribution of the magnetic field, so the radiation may be lower down than this Euro level, and usually the astronaut maybe feel some flares on their retinas. So this shows that the radiation, the dose increased in this region. But usually, you know that the orbit, the spacecraft, the station orbiting the Earth, 1.5 hours each time. So usually we only stay a very small portion in this area. So that will not have a very serious influence to the astronauts. And the 6 hours, you are correct. And this 6 hours EVA, it will have more radiation than inside the station because no protection of the cabin is made of metal, so that's provide a very good protection from the radiation. But the EVA, so they cannot stay there for longer times. And you know that the Earth is the low Earth orbit station is protected by the magnetic field of the Earth. So in the future, if we can walk on the moon, it will be a very different matter because you know that is the moon is far from the magnetic field of the low Earth orbit. So if anything, if they have a burst of the sun's activities, we must dealing with these kind of issues to protect the lives of the astronauts.
So this is a very good point. If you're traveling from Earth to Mars, radiation is the biggest hazard so far. So you have to, design the spacecraft in such a way that you have your own gravity field or something. So otherwise, you're exposed to the strong radiation plasma from the sun, and you would not get to Mars safely. So it's not an easy job.
Exactly. Some of my colleagues from ESA, they have some study.
The European
they say
Space
that
Agency.
for the whole lifespan of the whole career of an astronaut, the total dose he or she received must no greater than 1,000 millisievert.
And that translates into how many hours of EVA?
That depends on the
roughly?
environment. If you stay in the low Earth orbit, maybe a very longer time, because in the low Earth orbit, as Yang Zhao has mentioned, the radiation is not so serious. But if outside the low Earth, far from beyond the low Earth orbit, such as a lunar mission, even in a lunar base, or the missions to Mars,
the radiation belt.
so there are some things that maybe with traditional propulsion system, chemical propulsion system, we need more than 1.5 years to go to Mars and go back. So maybe during this process, if you don't have a very good protection for the astronauts, maybe it's not feasible. So also there are some saying that we should perform a Mars mission within maybe 1 or 2 months with the help of nuclear reactors. With the nuclear engines, maybe it can be much more faster. So we can go to the Mars maybe within 1 or 2 months and then go back.
So the station, which is 400 kilometers above the Earth, is still relatively safe and still in the magnetic field. Even the moon is still part of it, still in the magnetic field protection areas of the Earth. So the solar wind and solar system doesn't affect too much. But once you're outside of the lunar Earth cislunar areas, you would be exposed to solar radiations. But 400 kilometers is the altitude that is designed for relative safety and for efficiency.
So like you said, 400 kilometers, the Shenzhou 12 space ship will be heading to that orbit, also will be at the height of about 400 kilometers.
Yep.
How difficult is it to dock and rendezvous in orbit at such a height?
Docking rendezvous takes a lot of challenges. As Professor Yang mentioned, there are long distance alignment and short distance alignment, and also automated dockings and fast dockings. There are many systems that we have already tried out during the previous Shenzhou missions. So the space station itself, in fact, flips itself and ready for the docking. And the final alignment will take some time before the real touching is on. We have done lots of simulations on the ground. We use floating devices to simulate the docking and rendezvous. So it's relatively safe, as we also had a number of experiences in the past with Tiangong 1 and Tiangong 2 missions. So docking and rendezvous has been made very easy at this moment. So we're expecting that to happen in 6 or 7 hours, just before we have dinner in Beijing. We expect them to dock with the ship and starting to entering the Tianhe capsule.
And it said that it's going to be a fast automated docking. I mean, what factors do they have to consider when deciding when to dock? You mentioned about 6 to 7 hours after they are in space. I have learned that one of the consideration is the space sickness. Usually,
exactly. That is called space motion sickness. This is because you know that we have organ inside in our ears to sense our attitude and our position. So we get used to the situation on the ground with the gravity. But when we go out into outer space with the microgravity environment, the organ will be confused, and also there is some reflection to our body. So that is called the sickness. And this happens usually after 6 hours after you come into the orbit, and disappear after 2 days in the orbit. So that is the reason, one of the reasons we perform the docking in the past missions after 2 days go into space, because at that moment the space motion sickness has already, the astronaut feel better at that moment. If anything wrong happened, they are in a good condition to perform the manual docking. And today with faster and rendezvous and docking, you know that already usually in 6 hours. So at this period, the space motion sickness has not happened, so they can perform the docking. Well, concerning the docking, you know that China adopt APS, or androgynous peripheral attached system. With this system, it can dock of the 2 very large spacecrafts.
I'm sorry to jump in here. It is 8:37 a.m. Beijing time. We are about 45 minutes to go till liftoff, so it's T-minus 45 now. You're watching the live picture of the re-entry module. The Long March-2F rocket and the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft is set to ferry these 3 Chinese astronauts to the country's newly built but not yet fully completed space station. The launch takes place at this remote military operated spaceport we're seeing in northwest China called Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. The launcher and the crew capsule has already been put together. Everything is all set, waiting to launch.
Yeah. And Mr. Xu, how does this manned spacecraft dock with the core modules? Is there any differences between the earlier Tianzhou cargo ship docking procedure?
Well, Tianzhou is docking on the rear end of the Tianhe station, so it doesn't have to adjust the attitude of the Tianhe, but the Tianhe has to be flipped to get the adapter ready for the rendezvous and docking of the the Shenzhou mission. So the Shenzhou spaceship has to travel and chase up with the station at a relatively higher speed, and then at the final 30 or 40 meters, it will be slowed down and using lots of alignment systems like laser alignment and also geographic. The graphic alignment systems, so that all of these are aligned, and then they will slowly dock with the station. It's similar to the previous missions that we have already experienced. In particular, the Shenzhou 11 and the Tiangong 2 has many fast dockings and man maneuver docking. So we have backup plans. If that one automated doesn't work, we will have another man-controlled dockings. But these are all, this time it's going to be controlled by the ground and automated system rather than human-controlled docking rendezvous.
So,
yeah, and Mr. Yan, you earlier just mentioned the space station have 2 berths for the manned spacecraft and another 2 for experimental modules. Can you just explain a little bit on that kind of design?
Yes, you know that from this model we can see that on the front of the node we have a docking port. With the docking port we have multiple devices, such as, for instance, we have the transponder of the microwave radar. You know that the microwave radar is mounted on the orbital module of the Shenzhou spaceship. It can measure the relative distance, relative velocity, and also relative altitude between the 2 vehicles. And also this radar can act as a communication link between the 2 vehicles. And besides that, we can also have a LiDAR and optical sensors for the docking system. So you can see that the docking system is very, very complex to measure the relative parameters between the 2 vehicles to ensure the safety. But for the berthing port, all these are omitted to be simplified. And you know that we only need to connect the two modules together with the berthing port as the experimental module as the permanent part of this station. So it's different.
all right, 8:40 a.m. here in Beijing. We're less than 45 minutes to go till launch. I want to go back to my colleague Li Dongning here in the studio to look at other stories making headlines around the world once again. Dongning.
Thank you very much, Yu Yuan. Now let's go to Geneva again, where a day-long summit between the presidents of Russia and the United States wrapped up early on Wednesday. And on the agenda was everything from cybersecurity and human rights to the environment. Although both agreed progress was made over diplomats returning to their posts, stark differences still remain over a host of other issues, including China. Now, Tony Waterman tells us more from Geneva.
President Biden struck a realistic but optimistic tone at the end of this meeting. He said his talks with the Russian president were good, that they were positive, and that there were no threats issues. This is really echoing what we heard from Mr. Putin himself, who called these talks constructive. This is notable because even until the very last moments, there was concerns that there would be a lot of animosity in the room when these two presidents met, because there was a lot of tough issues that needed to be addressed. But at the end of the day, they were able to reach agreement on a few issues, most notably on cybersecurity. They're going to put together working groups to discuss this issue of making the internet safer from hackers. Of course, a big issue for the United States, which has concerns over election meddling, also a series of attacks on vital infrastructure in the United States. And President Biden said that he did present President Putin with a list of 16 critical pieces of infrastructure that he believes should be off limits. Now they have to find some common ground on that list. They also made some progress on a new arms control agreement. They are going to have discussions on the New START treaty. This is something that was just renewed in February for 5 years. Perhaps they will expand that to include new types of emerging weaponry or new types of emerging technology that can be used in warfare. They also agreed to return ambassadors to each other's countries.
I did what I came to do. Number one, identify areas of practical work our two countries can do to advance our mutual interest and also benefit the world.
So a little bit of progress made, but when President Biden was asked whether he believed that Putin would change his behavior, he said he was not confident. The real test, he said, is going to come in the next 3 to 6 months to see how things progress, see how these conversations progress, and also see how Russia acts towards the United States. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Geneva.
Well, several residents in central Myanmar say security forces set their village ablaze after clashes with opponents of the country's military rulers. First of a series of spacewalks to equip the aging orbital outpost with powerful new solar panels. The electrical boost is needed to accommodate upcoming passengers and film crews. And the task was cut short due to a technical problem with the spacesuit of one, and the 2 astronauts might pick up the task again on Sunday. Japanese media are reporting that Tokyo Olympics organizers are considering a proposal to limit spectators to 10,000 at major events. Foreign spectators are already banned, and Japan will decide this month on whether to allow domestic spectators. And organizers say they will take proper coronavirus measures to ensure the safety of the games. But calls are growing in Japan for them to be cancelled. The Olympics have been already delayed for a year due to the pandemic and are expected to kick off on July the 23rd. But the US is among the fastest to vaccinate. It's now about half the population. The rate is even higher in San Francisco. The California city is close to having 70% of eligible residents fully vaccinated. It's a key benchmark that would make San Francisco the first US city to approach herd immunity. Mark New tells us more.
Having opened in April 2020, San Francisco's Embarcadero testing site has conducted nearly 500,000 COVID-19 tests, with results available within 36 hours, 99% of the time. But today, cars coming through are few and far between. The Embarcadero high-volume testing site was one of the first mass testing sites in the United States open to the general public. But now it's entering its final day of operation, ready to close its doors, and that's a good sign.
As a pandemic has changed, as more vaccine has become available and more people have been vaccinated, we definitely have seen testing numbers decrease. And we've actually gone from about a 5% positivity rate in January down to a 0.6% positivity rate. So given that, we are pivoting our testing efforts to really look at neighborhoods that are most impacted.
As of this weekend, of those eligible, 80% of San Franciscans have had their first dose of vaccine and 70% are fully vaccinated.
We are the biggest municipality that has this high of a level of vaccination. So yes, it is unparalleled. I do think we've probably achieved that elusive herd immunity. Remember what herd immunity means. It does not mean eradication. It means getting levels so low that those who are non-immune, like children who can't be vaccinated, are protected by the immunity of those around us. That's the standard definition of herd immunity.
Gandhi says the willingness of San Franciscans to get vaccinated, combined with a tech-driven population, have fueled the city's success. She also cites strong community outreach efforts to educate specific neighborhoods and provide vaccines on site.
And at 80% first dose, we have very low rates of infection. We haven't had a death in the city for over a month. And we also have low hospitalizations. And now the only way to fundamentally know that you're at herd immunity for a virus is to open up and keep on testing and ensure that cases and hospitalizations don't go up.
That's being put to the test as the state of California loosens masking restrictions with a reopening of the economy. While testing has scaled back, the public health department says it cannot let down its guard.
We know that there are variants that are occurring throughout the world that are making their way into the US. And these variants tend to be more infectious in nature and could cause more hospitalizations and worse disease. So we are carefully monitoring all of that information to ensure as we reopen that we still have a handle on COVID. But right now, everything is looking good.
Baba says it's important her department continues to spread the message that in order for businesses to stay open and residents to feel comfortable in crowded places, the best solution is to get vaccinated. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
All right, Tianhe, Yangzhao, that's all from me. Back to you guys.
Thanks so much, Dongning. And we are getting really close to the launch. It's a little bit more than half an hour to go. There you see the launch tower. Oh, I think the level 1 and level 2 of the retractable platform has opened. There you see the stage 1 and stage 2 of the rockets near the ground. You can see the side boosters right near the ground. Oh, well, is that okay?
It's very close to see the whole rockets coming out of this.
Yeah.
So the final part that we're going to be open is the fairing part where they contain the astronaut itself. So they have to keep that part closed as for the last moment.
Yeah, there you see the 3 astronauts. I think they're closing their eyes. They're resting for a bit.
Yeah.
Well, And once they're up there, they will be away for a long time. They're 3 months. Do they get to call their family, maybe video chat? Do they have the chance to do that?
Yeah, they have a communication with the ground, but they, remember that they are circling around the Earth in a high speed, so their overpassing time is kind of limited, in particular to the Chinese territory. But they're using the communication to have video talks with their family members. But I'm sure that will be part of the scene that we're going to see in the future. Video communications and emails are routine. Of course, they can send data packages through the Tianhe and other system that is operational in orbit 24/7. But for video communications, it takes some bigger bandwidth and would take some time limitations when they're overpassing.
And usually, what kind of personal belongings can these astronauts bring with them?
Exactly. Yesterday, during the
press
news conference,
yes.
The reporters asked the question to Mr. Nie Haisheng, asked what belongings he take, and he mentioned that he will show these during his mission in space. Very interesting. And you know that during the missions in ISS before, usually they take some cameras. You know that the most favorite entertainment for the astronauts is not like the Earth. The most enjoyable things for them is to observing the beautiful views of the Earth. You know that there is a module inside the ISS called Cupola. Cupola has 7 very huge windows to view the Earth. So it is the most favorite part for all astronauts there. In their spare time, they will stay there, enjoy the view, and also sometimes taking photos. Mr. Hatfield, the Canadian astronaut, also take photos of the Beijing, and he sent that photo to me. And also, I took photos of the ISS. So we took photos of each other with a distance of more than 400 kilometers. So that's a very interesting experience.
Well, is there any windows on the China space station?
No, Chris Hatfield about the ISS. He has a chance to take photos of Beijing.
I think we do have windows on the re-entry module. Once the fairing departure, you can see light from that small window.
Yes, several years before, the CMSA also released some videos taken by Mr. Yang Liwei during his Shenzhou 5 missions, the beautiful view of the Earth. You may notice from this video that although most of the rotational platforms are open, there are some arms still connected or attached near the launch vehicle, because with still some cables and some pipes connected to the launch vehicle. We have signals, we have electricity supplies to the vehicle at this moment.
And they will be detached, I guess, when we get extremely close.
When near the launch time, the arms will also be open.
Right. Here is the final countdown, 30 minutes countdown. That is the command control announcing that T-minus 30.
So we just have 30 minutes to go.
So 11 missions overall for the construction of China's space station, 4 manned missions, 4 cargo missions, and 3 module launches. And we've already got the Tianhe core module and the Tianzhou cargo ship up there. The complex has been running in orbit for some time now. What kind of tasks have they been performing since in orbit?
You have already mentioned the Tianzhou 2. You know that today Tianzhou 2 is already attached to the station on the, as Yan-Song have mentioned, on the docking port on the rear part. But after left the Shenzhou 12 mission, the Tianzhou 2 will first detached and then dock to the front part, because you know that we have refueling system both on the docking ports on the front part and the rear part. So we must check everyone. So the Tianzhou 2 is very important, not only because this, but we will also have other critical...
All right, there you see another level of retractable platform. I think that's the level 2, a correction there, yeah. Level 2, a retractable platform being rolled back. You will soon see the stage 2 rocket.
And we're about to see the fairing?
No,
the fairing will be the last
that's going to happen in the
one.
end. Yes.
And
that's the stage.
And we just hear about evacuation order, I thought. from the controller?
Yes, we already heard from the commander, the chief commander, to check if they have mentioned the Qingdao station, the ground station, and also Huashan means the Weinan station. All these stations will monitoring the flight and also receiving the telemetry data from the launch vehicle. So these stations must be checked if the ground stations, the antennas are okay for this mission, and then it can continue.
Yeah, there you see the second stage rocket.
Dr. Yang, just tell us more about this, the second stage of the Long March-2F.
When does it kick in?
The Long March-2F, as I have mentioned, the second stage is the end stage. It will go into the same orbit of the Shenzhou 12 spaceship. The diameter is 3.35 meters, and it is a little bit shorter than the first stage, and it only has one engine. The one engine is the vacuum version. The vacuum version of the same engine on the first stage.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There you see they are finally opening the last retractable platform, revealing the spacecraft. And soon you can see two Chinese characters on the spacecraft, making it different. I mean, on the rocket, making it different from other ones, called Shenzhen, the divine arrow, right?
Yeah.
That was named after, that was named by the former president Jiang Zemin in 2003, I guess.
Exactly.
After
now
the
we can
Shenzhou 5
see
mission.
the payload fairing.
That's right. It's clear to see the fairing and
Yeah,
the escape tower on top of that.
And of course, the payload this time is the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft.
Yes.
You may notice 4 grid fins on the payload fairing.
Yeah.
What are they?
So during the emergency escape, the grid fins will be deployed to adjust the aerodynamic forces on the body to make it stable. So that's the usage of this grid wing.
Is that the same thing that we can use? We can see on those reusable rockets when they're coming back to.
Exactly. So the grid fins can rotate its axis to adjust, but this one is a fixed one because the only usage of this grid fin is to just to stable the space the craft if it is emergency escape. But for the, as you mentioned, for some rockets, including some small launchers in China, we use it's not a grid fin, but a grid rubber. So it can rotate with its axis, and it can adjust the attitude of the launch vehicle.
There you have the close-up shot of the spacecraft again, a 3-module spacecraft. You've got the orbital module where astronauts work, eat, and sleep. That orbital module is the living area, and you've got the re-entry module. That is where the astronauts are sitting in. The re-entry module is located in the midsection of the spacecraft and contains seating for the crew. It is the only portion, there you have it. This is the only portion of the Shenzhou which returns to Earth's surface. Well, its shape is a compromise between maximizing living space and allowing for some aerodynamic control upon re-entry. And lastly, you've got the service module, which contains life support and other equipment required for functioning of Shenzhou. You've also got 2 pairs of solar panels which will deploy once they are in space.
Yes.
And talking about reusable, it's a new trend that all the rocket engineering is seeking for in the next phase, especially after the SpaceX launched their Falcon series. And in last September, China also announced that Long March-2F rocket has been successfully delivered reusable experimental spacecraft into the orbit. Is that going to be the same spacecraft this time?
Not like this. You know that we use a different version, like the version launched the Tiangong 1 and the Tiangong 2 laboratory. The difference is that because during what you mentioned, the mission, we don't have astronauts on board, so we don't need the emergency escape system. So it used a quite different payload fairing. The payload fairing for launching the Tiangong 1 and Tiangong 2, the diameter of the payload fairing is 4.2 meters, the second largest in China. The most largest is those used in the Long March-5B. The payload fairing, the diameter is 5.2 meters. The payload fairing used for this Shenzhou spacecraft is 3.8 meters, just the third largest in China. Because you know that the Shenzhou spaceships, the diameter is smaller than the Tiangong laboratories, so we don't need the larger ones. And because you know that we have emergency escape tower, because of this, the capability of the version used for launching spaceship is only about 8.1 ton. tons. But for the other version you mentioned, launching the reusable spacecraft and for launching the Tiangong and Tiangong 2, the capability can reach to 8.6 tons. A little bit bigger because the emergency escape system is omitted for these kind of missions.
Once again, a great view of the Long March-2F rocket you're watching. It's specifically designed to launch the crewed Shenzhou spacecraft into orbit. And it has another name, as we mentioned, called Shenjian or Divine Arrow. It is a human-rated 2-stage rocket. It has 4 strap-on boosters. As you can see from afar, those boosters are at the bottom. Long March-2F rocket has never failed a single launch, and today is going to be its 15th launch, taking these 3 astronauts to the newly built Chinese space station.
And now you're watching this the Long March-2F rocket, which is about 58 meters high and 497 tons. And the Long March-2F is what has been called a 2.5-stage rocket. It consists of 2 3.35 meter diameter core stages and 4 2.25 meters diameter side booster, just as Mr. Yang introduced. It has 4 main engines. Each of them can generate 75 tons of thrusts. And don't forget the side boosters, which could also provide some extra 75 ton thrust to each. So we combine them together, so over 600 tons thrust will be produced to power the rocket to launch off, allowing the Long March-2F to deliver some 8 tons of payload into the orbit over 200 kilometers above our head.
And any upgrades to this Shenzhou 12 spacecraft that worth noting?
Of course, there are some improvements. You know that during the former missions, the Shenzhou spacecraft, it docked to the Tiangong laboratories. It only needs to stay there up to 1 month.
Yes.
But this time, the
3
routine
months.
regime will be half a year. So the Shenzhou spaceship will stay there in what we call a hibernation mode. In this mode, most of the instruments on board the station, on board the spaceship will be shut down. But it must, as we have discussed, to evaluate the influence of radiation to all these instruments to make everything is correct. Just before leaving to go back, so the Shenzhou spaceship is to wake up from the hibernation mode and check every instrument is okay. And to fit this, we also have some improvement. For instance, the outside of the re-entry capsule, we have a different material covering the re-entry capsule, and also some configuration inside the Shenzhou space is also modified. For instance, we usually use water tanks on in the orbital module in the former missions, but this time we only use some small bags because you know that we will go to the station and not necessary to have a big water tank.
Yeah.
So this can save a large amount of the mass, and we can have more some cargoes to this in this orbital module.
And also, we're going to have the regenerates the life supporting system in the core.
No. For the Shenzhou spaceship, because
Sorry,
it only
20 minutes to go. That's a countdown. Just wanted to mention that to our
Yes.
viewers. Go ahead, Professor.
You know that the Shenzhou spaceship can only fly independently for several days. So not necessary to have a regenerative support, life support system. Only inside the station we use this kind of system because it also occupies a large volume and also have a very large amount of mass.
Mr. Xu, any insight about China's own reusable rockets?
Oh yes, we're doing. We're seeing a lot of international, especially SpaceX. They're doing a great job with the reusable launch vehicles, and they even recover some of the fairings. It's good stuff. I think what China is trying to do is that we have a state-owned enterprise that is working on reusable launching system. What we're currently using is what we call expendable launch vehicle. So that's going to be for single launch. And because of the toxic materials and the engine technology, we do not reuse those engines. The SpaceX engine is part of, in fact, the space shuttle engine. It's called Mullins. It's in fact designed for reuse. So we have 2 running parallel teams. That one is from the state-owned enterprise that is developing this technology, and the others are commercial sectors. We see a lot of newcomers from the commercial sectors. They're
Some
doing
startups are doing their
yes, the startups are doing a good job in experimenting this. this technology. I think it's a good beginning. But currently, we're still in the process of expandable launch vehicle because of the manufacturing capacity we have. We're able to cope with the Chinese space program on that perspective. But we're doing this on commercial basis for reusable launch vehicle.
Yeah, we do have seen some news coming out that China is doing a test on their reusable, but it seems like they used a different approach to come back from the Falcon from the SpaceX are adopting. What's the difference? They're using parachute or?
Yes, some of our testing are using as we have mentioned, the grid fins.
The grid fins,
grid fins to have at least have accurate falling point. So this can also save a lot of money. You know that the falling area usually is very, very big, very wide. And with this controlled re-entry, it can very precisely land it to a certain point.
In the case of the SpaceX, they can even land on the sea platform.
And as you have mentioned, during the launch several days before in Xichang Satellite Center for the Long March 3B launch vehicle, we just tested the controlled parachute, which can also deploy during the falling and then control with some GNSS or the satellite navigation system. With the help, we can measure the position and then control the parachute to a certain point. So this is a different measure. There are multiple choices, still not determined for the future's reusable launch vehicle. But you know that just last year we have the maiden flight of the Long March-8 launch vehicle in Wenchang spacecraft launch site. This launch vehicle, in the future, the improved version will be a reusable one. We just have the maiden flight because this is a very economical launch vehicle designed for some commercial launches. It will be very competitive in prices, but in the future, if it can be reused, it will be even with an even cheaper price.
So it's all commercial based, and also reusable are less efficient because you have to put more fuels.
Yes, and that was also a trend that we can observe on Chinese market because before we think the space it's just the state owned. It's what the government can do. But now we see more and more private sectors have been involved in this, and also state-owned company are also participated, and they're developed their own type of the rocket and trying to put them into the commercial market.
I think it's a good thing to compete with each other, and also rocket technology. Of course, there's our state-of-the-art technologies, and we need more newcomers to come and to compete with the market. And even domestically, we see a number of good startup companies that are doing great jobs in developing new rocket engines.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in here. It's 9:07 Beijing time. We are 15 minutes away from the launch. There you hear the call outs, T-minus 15 minutes.
Yeah, the private market, the private space market, it seems to be it's a new and it's emerging market right here in China. And earlier, I have investigated some of this the private company in China's Yizhuang. There is many company right there, and also I think the company that Mr. Yan you work for have already got this the commercial rockets, right?
I come from a state company.
Yeah,
I am a satellite maker. I launched one of my satellite with a private company. They provide the launch services. You know that. Oh, okay. All the ground staff are called to withdraw from the launch pad.
You heard the commands from the control center. All the ground staff needs to be evacuated right now, indicating it's a go for the launch. Things are entering the final stages.
So you can see almost all the rotational platform has been opened, so no need for the ground staff there. So they will leave. But still, as I mentioned, some arms are connected to the vehicle with the cables and pipes to have the telemetry and mirroring signals from the vehicle.
There, see the bus taking the ground staff away from the launch tower. They will retreat to safe zone, I guess at least 1.5 kilometers away from the launch pad.
Yes.
Well, last time in Wenchang, when the China launches the core module, we see a lot of this ordinary people who comes to the beach to watch this the launching event. What about this time? Can the ordinary people come to Jiuquan to watch?
Yes. I've seen some posts on the social media in China. Some of private companies organize tourists to watch the launch.
The tour.
Yeah.
But you can speculate from a distance away, about a few kilometers.
Yeah.
You have mentioned the commercial or the private companies. It is very interesting that all the orbital launches attempt also performed in this Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. Two of them, including the Beijing Interstellar Glory and the Galactic Energy, performed their orbital launches successfully in China. So we now have two private companies which can provide these orbital launch services.
All right, 12 minutes to go till launch.
And talk about China's the private space market, and I also realized it was not just for the rocket, but also for satellites. The satellites is the big parts of the market, right?
Yeah. There are more companies engaged in making satellites. You know that for launch services is really relatively complex. Not only you should have the ability to making the launch vehicles, but also there are many security issues. For instance, we've discussed about the falling area of the substages. We must dealing with these kind of issues. So this is more complex, and for the satellites is relatively easier. Especially, you know that many universities in China already have their own satellites. Some are even for the educational purposes. Even it's very interesting that there is some science outreach, science population satellites made by high school students. So this is also very interesting.
And will there be joint flights? Since you mentioned the commercial use of space flights, will there be joint flights of Chinese and foreign astronauts in the near future?
It is quite possible. During the announcement yesterday, the China Manned Space Agency, Mr. Ji Ximing, has mentioned the foreign astronauts are trained in China. Several people, I can still remember that Ms. Thamensha, Christoph Ferretti were trained in Qingdao in the rescue training. And our astronaut Ye Guangfu also were trained in Europe in the cave training. So we have cooperations, and in the future, I believe that sooner or later we can see the foreign astronauts taking the Shenzhou spaceship to our station.
That was the big countdown clock on the screen you just saw there saying scheduled liftoff. We're less than 10 minutes away. You're seeing that huge rocket, Long March-2F, right there, still attaching to the umbilical tower. And those umbilical cords are expected to be detached seconds, 40 seconds to 50 seconds ahead of launch.
So China's space station program has involved so many partners from the international community, including the Europe Space Agency. And can you just tell us how we cooperated and what fields we cooperated?
We have a close cooperation with Russia before.
Russia?
Our astronauts were trained in Russia during the 1990s.
So I just want to translate this to our viewers. There you see the monitoring screen. The temperature is 23.6 degrees Celsius. The wind direction is 2.2 meters per second. And there's also the visibility and humidity monitoring status there.
The commander has announced the accurate launch time, because the launch time is determined by the orbit of our Tianhe module.
And it's down to seconds, right? The launch time, exact launch time is 9:22:27 seconds.
Exactly.
The sky's clear today.
A good day for launch.
It's going to be a good day for launch.
And just show on the big screen in the control center that the wind speed is 2.7 meters. Not a very high speed, just fit for launch. And also the air around the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center is very clear. Visibility can reach to 30 kilometers. Very good condition. If we are lucky enough, maybe we can see from the telescope, which can record the separation between the first stage and the second stage.
We should be able to see the strap-on boosters released from the ground.
Yes.
If we have a clear sky, see a bit of cloud, but should be able to see it on visible sites. This separation of the strap-on boosters.
And an escape tower has been activated about 5 minutes before the launch.
It's even longer.
It's a little longer.
Because you know that at this moment, if anything wrong happened, the emergency escape will work.
Well, so once the astronauts are in the capsule and the hatch is closed, then the escape tower is armed. So they're ready to go, you know, shooting off.
Anytime. They're standing by.
There should be a safety plan at any minute.
Yes.
All the way to the station.
Development of the Shenzhou spaceship. Mr. Yuan Jiajun, who is also a former leader of China Manned Space Program, mentioned the first important test is the zero altitude escape test, which ignited the emergency escape tower from
the launch pad.
From the ground.
From this position, yes.
And that went well. That was successful.
That was successful.
But the escape tower is not going to come all the way down to the orbit, right?
If the launch goes smoothly, the first critical action after the pitch over will be the jettisoning of the escape tower. Because in a certain altitude, the aerodynamic forces will be smaller than the liftoff in the low altitude, so no need for the escape tower. Then in a certain area, in a certain period, will depend on the escape engines, on the payload fairing. And after that, after fairing is jettisoned, so it's already in an almost vacuum condition, and if anything wrong happened, the spaceship can use its own engines to leave the launch vehicle.
So is this escape tower going to be ejected even before the booster?
Before the fairing.
Actually, it is the
Before
first
the booster,
separation.
yes. So
the first separation will be the jettisoning of the escape tower happened about 2 minutes after launch.
We will see that in just a few moments. We're getting really close, a little more than 5 minutes to go till the final liftoff.
The astronauts are still, I think they're still watching their
flight manuals.
Just reading their flight manual. They just need to repeat that again and again.
I wonder how they feel at this moment. I mean, going into space would be the lifetime dream for every astronaut, right? I guess there will be boundless joy for.
Is there any other instrument that has been connected on those on the body of those astronauts?
Exactly. So they will monitoring the parameter, their biological parameters of their body. It will be also
heart rate,
respiration. If they don't feel not better, we can stop the whole procedure to deal with that.
In fact, we monitor this all the time.
That's right. I figure.
T-minus 5 minutes.
But from our earlier experience, the figure can show that all of those astronauts has been well trained and they can keep pretty calm even before the launch.
Usually they are very, very calm during the launch.
They're really
even
calm.
during any emergencies.
That's right.
Life-threatening emergencies. They're trained for
they were
that.
still very relaxed in their postures, and now they're getting ready for the launching position. So they have folded their legs to their appropriate position. So even 5 minutes before, they were still, like relaxing.
That's right.
Checking their seat belts, checking their knee guards.
They're going to put down everything and ready for the launch in 2 or 3 minutes.
And we're getting really close. That's the live image from the control center at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. There you see Vice Premier Han Zheng watching this launch among the audience. This is a live picture coming from the Beijing Aerospace City. Vice Premier Han Zheng among other senior leaders and officials. There is the Central Military Vice Chairman of the Central Military Chief there. That was Zhang Youxia, you just saw there. So these are top level officials. They're watching. That really speaks volume about how important Beijing sees this mission.
And we just realized
it's a good occasion and good timing for celebrating the party's 100 years.
It's a moment of pride too. This is Xu Qiliang, the other vice chairman of Central Military Commission. He is watching this launch very closely at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, among other leaders. So we've got two groups of high-level leaders watching this launch from Beijing and also at Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. All right, 3 minutes to go till launch. And it's interesting, it's usually quiet at launch control around this time as we're getting close to time zero. Not much comm going on there except for a few simple commands and the final countdown. And that's because the final status checks by now has all been completed. And that's a good sign. You don't want to hear too much noises around this time.
Yeah, they have a set of code of conduct that's already undergoing, so everything went well. So they're everything being quiet. If anyone raises a voice, that means there's an anomaly.
I believe at this moment the electrical supply has already transferred from ground to the interior batteries.
2 minutes to go. A nerve-wracking moment, I mean, for the flight crew, for the whole launch team, and for all of us who are watching. As much as this is a moment for excitement, it's also a moment for anxiety, isn't it?
And also the launching schedule is really tight for the China Space Station program. And we witnessed the first core module launch in the end of the April, and we saw the cargo ship just launched to the orbit just following maybe it's a few weeks later.
Even the cargo ship was delayed for a week, but was successfully launched into space.
That's right.
And right now, for the astronauts who are waiting there for launch, there's really not much they can do for this period of time. They're strapped in, things are out of their hands. They're relying on their team to get them out there safely. There we see the crew of Shenzhou 12 mission in the middle, Nie Haisheng, the flight commander, and alongside with him are the flight engineers, Boming and Tang Hongbo.
Yes.
All right, that's the call out. T-minus 60 seconds. An incredible moment to witness. Truly majestic view.
The astronauts are ready, in their ready position.
Yeah, they're ready.
Yeah, and soon we're going to see the umbilicals being detached. That's going to happen from any moment from now.
The arms will be finally
there you see
attached.
the retractable arm has been rolled back.
Wow. The historic moments is coming. And
30 seconds till launch. The first crewed mission destined for Tiangong China Space Station on board the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft. Less than 20 seconds to go.
And the Shenzhou 12 will be Nie Haisheng's third space outing.
That's right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. There's the booster kicking in. And liftoff. Just spectacular. The launch of Shenzhou 12 spacecraft heading to the Chinese space station, the divine vessel shipping away from its spaceport. Its destination, the Heavenly Palace. 3 astronauts on board the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft will be ferried to the core module of China Space Station. And of course, you're hearing the voices from the launch team providing tracking status, saying things are going good. That's the sound we'd like to hear. We have different ground tracking stations.
Okay, it's pitched over. Change its direction of flight.
All right. And
Wow,
that's the view of the side boosters. You're looking down at the tail of the rocket.
This is a camera on the second stage.
Major event coming up is the separation of the escape tower, right? That's going to happen about 2 minutes into the flight.
And because the sky today is really clear, so we have a bit of a view.
Clear visual.
Yeah, we can have the clear visual of the rockets coming, launching off into the sky. And
right. The astronauts, they look fine to me. They look okay.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, the rocket has 4 side boosters. Those are the 2 out of the 4 you're watching there.
So is that supposed to be the period that the astronauts feel very uncomfortable?
Yes,
It's
that's
speeding
the
up?
very
It's
very
speeding up?
beginning period.
They
Yes.
were already experiencing the G load.
Yeah.
All right.
When we'll see peak G load?
The separation before the first stage.
Okay, so
All
we're
right, so
not
it's
there
coming
yet.
Yeah.
The
As
G-forces are
the
increasing.
First thing would be the separation of the strap-on boosters.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
the first one will be
the
setting of
escape
the
tower.
emergency escape tower.
If everything goes right, we're going to see the escape
Several
tower
seconds.
jettison
We
in a
won't be
few
able
moments.
to see it on the camera because this camera was looking down to the strap-on boosters.
Oh, that's the
that's
3D
simulation.
animation. That animation is based on
Yeah, that's the
real-time
escape
telemetry.
tower.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
that's
the
the
escape tower.
separation of the escape tower that we just saw there. And you heard the call out.
And
That's
then
the infrared
150
image.
seconds will be the separation of the 4 boosters.
A great infrared image showing you a successful separation of the escape tower, really indicating the low-level flight, the initial stage of the flight went well.
That's in fact an infrared camera that is looking at the rocket itself.
Right.
So this is the video.
Again, the site boosters.
Coming up
separation.
next is
Booster
the
separation.
booster separation.
And first stage,
Yeah,
well,
great.
there you see
Separation.
the booster
The
separation.
side booster has been separated from the core stage.
And the first stage rocket
Beautiful.
separation. You see the 5 bright dots? Those
Yeah,
are the
that's
4
beautiful.
side boosters and the one
And also the
stage
core
1
stage,
rocket.
the first stage is also
Core
already
stage rocket.
separated.
So now the astronauts should be feeling really comfortable, and they're making some movement. You can see.
Oh, they're waving to the camera. I'm
And
telling
the
the
next
team they're okay.
operation will be jettisoning of the payload fairings.
I think that's the image of the stage 2 rocket engine.
Exactly. The
Coming
camera
up next-
mounted on towards the backward.
Right. Coming up next is the shutdown of the stage 2 rocket engine.
And there is only one main engine for the
Only
second
one
stage.
main engine
Okay,
and
engine.
4
That's the
vernier
view
engines.
of the
one main
spacecraft,
engine
right?
and
That's
4
the-
more vernier engines. Vernier engines is to control the
All
attitude.
right.
Yeah,
That's
the
the
fairing.
jettison of the
Yeah, yeah,
fairing.
yeah.
That's the solar panel you're seeing. Which module is that? Is that the orbital module, service module? Service module. Is
It
it?
is separation of the payload fairings.
The fairing covers the service module as well as the capsule.
The camera, as you mentioned, is mounted on the I believe the propulsion module.
There you can see the Earth from the
Yes.
camera on the
Yeah,
spacecraft.
we can already.
The ellipse of
That's
the
a great
Earth.
visual,
Beautiful. So a series of fast maneuvers and status reports there.
So far,
9:26 a.m. Beijing time here, about 4 minutes into the flight. Everything continues to look good.
They should be already 100 kilometers above Earth already. That is
Wow, it's incredible to hear how fast the rocket
the whole
is going.
process that before they are hitting the orbit, it just need like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, 580 seconds also.
Yeah, roughly 10 minutes. Yeah.
And the next critical step will be the shutdown of the main engine. And then it will work on the 4 vernier engines. Vernier engine can rotate in different directions to control the attitude. And finally, and can adjust the orbit to be accurate enough.
So this engine you're seeing from the screen is very important because it has to have a surgical precision of when to shut down, to eject that spacecraft into the precise altitude and position to catch up with the station.
And what's it like to endure so many G-forces? I guess we are going to hit the time when the crew will feel maximum G-forces before the second stage rocket shut down?
They've already passed the most inconvenient period.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, already. Because the thrust of the second stage is not very large.
Okay.
Only one engine, one main engine. Just before the separation of
And we really didn't notice much difference from their facial expression, from their body gesture. I guess they've been trained to endure such pressure.
we can see from the left screen that's the shows
3D
the data
animations.
link between the ground station and the vehicle.
And that animation is based on real-time telemetry. It's not a pre-made video. It's really showing you what's
Yes.
going on in real time.
This is the real camera.
Yeah.
And you can see the sky become dark because it's already in outer space. It's black, pitch black.
The bright part is the Earth, is the horizon of the Earth,
And
very
there are
bright.
numerous cameras on this vehicle, and they have light on it to illuminate the rocket so that everything shows up on camera, and engineers can take a look at them, just in case of a problem or anything
because it's already in almost a vacuum condition, so the vibration is not so intensive than the initial stage.
So this engine, the second stage engine has been designed for just one main engine and 4 extra engines. This kind of design was specially designed for the precise orbit entering.
It comes from the original design of the Long March-2 rocket. So we saved a lot of money by using the same engine on the first and the second stage, just a different configuration with vacuum condition. But still we need the 4 vernier engines. Vernier engine is much smaller than the main engine, but with these engines we can have an accurate adjust of the orbit.
Okay.
It's almost 9:30 a.m. We're almost about 8 minutes into the flight. And keep in mind that this is China's first crewed mission since 2016, nearly 5 years ago. It's also China's 7th crewed spaceflight overall in the past 18 years. Ground tracking staff are saying everything is normal, is going nominal. You just saw some bright orange flame there.
The main engine is shut down.
Now it's been shut down. Another critical step being completed.
So now those astronauts
now they're floating.
Oh, they're
now
floating.
They're floating. So
now they're supposed to feel more comfortable.
They do look like they're a bit more at ease now. They're looking at their flight manual.
We can hear from the voice that it shows that the USB, the tracking, the radio tracking, and also the optical cameras tracking very normal. So the vernier engine, the 4 vernier engines is still working to adjust its orbit very accurately.
Yeah, and they're looking out of the window. You can see the light from the window.
Yeah. This is a camera on board on the propulsion module.
Okay.
You can see the folded panels, the 4 pieces of panels on one side.
And coming up next will be the spacecraft separation.
Exactly, after the shutdown of the 4 vernier engines.
So in fact, they're fine-tuning their attitude and to make sure that it's facing at the right directions before they shut down and separate the engine.
Yeah.
Usually the separation is near the eastern coast of Shandong province.
How this spacecraft is gonna find the Tianhe core module in space? I mean, there's nothing that you can use to.
Well, there's so many things. I mean, there's signals that transmitting to each other. Their navigation systems, their BeiDou, they're communicating, and their ground crews are supporting. So this time the astronaut doesn't have to do too much, and it's going to be automatic, fast connection.
Yes.
The robotic just take care of everything.
The Shenzhou 12 mission, once again, will last about 3 months in space, the longest stay in space to date by Chinese astronauts.
Oh, separation.
All right, you see the great separation of spacecraft. Second stage is drifting away.
Yeah, that's right.
So the next critical step will be the unfolding of the solar panels.
Solar panels.
So once the separation is done, the capsule and the service module has to adjust its own attitude.
And you can see the spacecraft, the full view of the spacecraft from that 3D animation, right? You can see the returning capsule in the middle, and then the orbiting module and the service module. Another great view of the Earth.
That's just the,
This is a video from the camera mounted on the spacecraft.
As we're just standing by for the deployment of solar panels.
Look at our home.
The voice says that the data link between the vehicle and the data relay satellite has been established.
You can see that a pan is floating.
Yeah.
Wow.
They're tossing things around.
Yeah, look inside the
They are just enjoying the microgravity now.
I think the astronauts are just showing off to us.
There's one first timer.
Oh. They just won't let us know.
This is the first time for Hongbo.
I tell you that.
First time for Hongbo, so it's going to be an exciting journey.
All right. So this is the Shenzhou 12 mission, and this mission will involve a series of technical verification tasks related to the performance and function of the Tianhe core module. It will include extravehicular activity using EVA suits delivered by Tianzhou 2, the cargo ship, and the verification of the regenerative life support system. So everything's going to happen after 6 or 7 hours later, right? After they docking with the Tianhe core module.
And you can see the movement of the blue Earth around the spacecraft.
Yeah.
So it's
Just
really moving very nice.
amazing.
Great picture here.
That's right.
华山出轨根数及分离点参数发出，景山。
The voice tells us.
There you see the deployment of solar panels.
Now the solar panel is unfolding.
Unfolded.
Major cheerings.
Normally
in the
for
audience
satellite launch, this would be the success signal.
Oh, yeah.
So at this
There you
moment,
have
the
it.
spacecraft has continuous power supply.
That was, this is the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. The image earlier was from Beijing. This is the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center once again.
So the guys who's responsible for rockets are relaxed. Their job is done. So now it's up to the life support system.
That's also a relay race, right?
Yes, yes.
And this is from Beijing Aerospace City.
And it's a spacecraft right now in the same orbit of
Yeah,
the
it's the
Tianhe core
same
module.
altitude, but they need to have final adjustment so that they can catch up with the.
At this moment, the Shenzhou 12 is in the same orbital plane of the Tianhe 1, but with a different altitude.
跟踪正常，前反向数据收发正常。
Usually the apogee is 200 kilometers, and the perigee is 200 kilometers, and the apogee depends on the control, and usually more than 300 kilometers high.
Up until now, everything is going well, but we don't want to call it too early. We are standing by for an official announcement from the launch team that's going to happen any moment from now.
We should confirm, as we've already heard the voice, that the initial orbit parameters has been sent to the ground stations, but we still need to verify and checking the accurate orbital parameters, because you know that these orbital parameters must be accurate enough to ensure that it can have the chance to dock with the station.
Yeah.
So only in this moment we can announce the success of the launch.
So
Not only launch into orbit, but still need to be accurate enough.
So lots of calculations there going on.
If it is
on the
not
ground.
accurate, it will waste a lot of propellants. So maybe not make it impossible to dock with the station.
So it will be taking a few burns before we catch up. So it's going to be using the apogee and perigee as well as the inclination to catch up with the station. So at the precise point, it will burn the engine to lift the altitude of the Shenzhou, so it can have a precise alignment with the Tianhe.
Usually we have 5 to 6 orbit maneuvers before docking with the station. And it will be done automatically.
The orbit maneuver will be.
So this the ground staff will be more relaxed because it will be done by the vehicle itself.
But also the astronauts could kick in to maneuver with that.
No, this will be not because you know that it will be calculated in the onboard computers, not by the astronauts. Only in some emergency cases, the astronaut can do something.
Oh, they are.
Oh, they're waving hands to
their
us.
helmets.
Hello.
They're waving to cameras. Well, a way of telling our team there they're okay, and another way of saying thank you.
Yes, just now we have just heard that the capsule itself has a good environment to open the helmet.
That is perfect.
So this means that for the third time, Mr. Nie Haisheng visited the outer space.
Yeah.
He becomes the second astronaut in China, just after Jing Haipeng, who have achieved 3 missions.
3 missions. Battery.
Impressive.
And
we're about
Salute to the
16 minutes into the flight.
So the person who stays in space for the longest period of time, that would be his record.
You can see Tang Hongbo and Liu Boming, who's sitting beside the window,
They're
looking
watching out
yeah.
through the window.
Enjoying, take it all in. The majestic view.
As I mentioned,
But
it
Nie
is the
Haisheng-
most favorite thing of the astronauts.
Yes.
Just enjoy the view of the Earth.
And it seems the solar panels are working properly.
You can actually hear the astronauts talking to each other.
They're talking about velocity 7.8, 7.9. That means kilometers per second. They're looking at their own speed.
Yeah.
348公里，倾角41.3度，周期1小时30分钟的预定轨道。太阳帆板展开，飞船工况正常，航天员状态良好。北京出轨根数及飞点参数已向各方向发出，后续工作按照正常计划实施。东风。
Talk to us what we just heard there. A series of
We
status
heard
reports.
that the initial orbit, the perigee is 200 kilometers, and the apogee is 345 kilometers, which means that it's a little bit lower than the than our station. This also means, as Yansheng has mentioned, it will circle the Earth faster than the Tiangong, Tianhe, and it can act as a chasing vehicle. With several orbits, it can go closer to the station. So after they close to within the distance of 52 kilometers, the long distance guidance will be ended, and then they will depend on the relative measurements, as I mentioned, the microwave radar, the lidar, and also the optical sensors to achieve the automatic docking.
So they also mentioned about the inclination 41 degrees, and they also mentioned about the route parameters. The route parameters is for the vehicle to maneuver, and based on that route parameters, and all the ground control team has to know that exact number to know where to start with. So that's all the report, which means basically means it's a good and successful launch.
I was going to ask you that. Based on those data, how good of a launch was it?
Well,
a lot of jargon going on.
So far, so good, yeah.
But of course, we're still waiting for the official announcement coming from the launch team.
Yeah, with the route number, these guys are starting to crunching the numbers.
Yeah.
Oh, another view
I
of
just noticed
Space
that.
City.
Yeah, and I just noticed that all of this, the astronauts. Can they open up their helmet right now?
Yeah, they have.
They have already did that.
Now they're going to announce the
北
launch
京领
results.
办，各号注意收听。
Okay. Here we have the command of this mission. Let's listen in.
Honorable leaders, comrades, according to the report from the Beijing Aerospace Control Center, Long March-2F Y12 rocket has sent Shenzhou 12 manned spacecraft to the preset orbit. The solar panel unfolded functionally well and also successfully. I now declare the launch of Shenzhou 12 mission a complete success.
There you have it. Zhang Zhifen, director of the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, officially announcing that the mission is a success. Once again, the launch mission is a success.
That's a great morning.
Great morning indeed.
Great morning.
And great moment for the construction of the Chinese space station. So it's a milestone event.
Oh, there you see Vice Premier Han Zheng shaking hands with engineers. This is at the Beijing Aerospace City. They're watching the launch there very closely.
So after 5 years, we now have astronauts in space.
Yeah. Again.
Yeah. For 3 months, at least.
Yeah. The space flight mission duration is going to set the new record for China, right?
Yes, and then also they're going to be continuing with the second batch of astronauts. We're going to see occasion of 6 working together in outer space and in our outer post in space.
So what time can we expect it for the next time? For the next
Well, next
cruise?
one would be, I think, cargo launches and to resupply with the.
Here are senior military officials at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. Another round of handshakes congratulating all the engineers of a successful launch. They deserve it.
Yes. After all of these years' hard work.
We usually call this a big red screen.
Big red screen. Yes,
Every
that's
time
good.
we hope that we have a big red screen to
That's
celebrate.
Once again, that was the vice chairman of the Central Military Commission congratulating the engineers there, Mr. Xu Qiliang, shaking hands with engineers. All right, there you had it, a successful launch. And now the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft is in orbit. It's expected to dock and rendezvous with the Tianhe core module of the Chinese space station in about 6 to 7 hours' time.
Yes.
And we're going to continue to monitor the situation and bring
Right.
you live coverage of that as well.
That's right.
So let me talk to our guests about it. What an extraordinary 15 minutes or so flight we've just witnessed. I mean, having devoted both of your careers to the space industry, how do you feel right now?
Actually speaking, I was very nervous. You see that we have some improvement, as we have already discussed, on the Shenzhou spaceship. On our space field, especially for the engineering, any modification is risky. So we must check if everything is okay. So although you know that the Shenzhou 10 mission is the first operational or applicational mission for China's manned space program, so at that moment the Shenzhou spaceship has already have its final shape and final configuration. But still, Shenzhou after Shenzhou 10, Shenzhou 11 and Shenzhou 12 missions have their own modifications and improvements. We've already discussed some configurations, the modifications, and also especially we have some modification on the docking mechanism. You know that during the years before, we only need to dock between two spacecraft with a mass about 8 tons. But today, you know that the Tianhe is more than 20 tons. In the future, if our station is extended, it can reach to a combination about 180 tons, much bigger. So the compact will be much more serious than the missions before. We must test that and check that it is okay. So we have all kinds of modifications, although only some small modifications, but still we must ensure everything. So I'm really nervous during this launch, although we've already practiced several times.
How do you feel,
Yeah,
Mr.
tell us
Xu?
about your feeling,
Well,
Mr.
it's
Xu.
just like goosebumping. I mean, every time there's a launch, in particular manned missions, I feel very excited and very nervous, especially during the initial, let's say, 60 seconds. That is a really critical moment for a successful mission. And once you see you can see the radical improvement in terms of technology that we use and the cameras that we use. We used to see a very blind view for launch. Now you can see from different perspectives, from the strap-on booster to the second stage, and even the final stage of the rocket, you can see a camera separating, and also so everything is on video. It's like
Yes.
it's like a TikTok in space.
That's right.
It's very exciting to me, and I feel you know the space sectors has good innovation in technologies, and I do look forward that they have a good rendezvous and docking to the station, where they can perform all the missions and maneuvers for in store for them in the station.
Yeah, this is history being made, absolutely. And now we have a recap of the successful launch of the Shenzhou 12 spacecraft. Have a look.
As we mentioned earlier, the China Space Station program has been involved in so many international cooperation, and it's been involved so many the international scientists. For some of that, we're now joined by Professor John Murthy, and he's a senior professor from Indian Institute of Astrophysics, the Spectroscopic Investigation of Nebular Gas Project, or SING, led by his team, has been selected as one of the 9 science experiments aboard the China Space Station. Welcome to the show, Professor. Please tell us more about your program and why this experiment has to be done in the space.
Well, what we do is we're looking at ultraviolet astronomy. And ultraviolet astronomy, the trouble from the ground is that all the UV from the space is blocked by the Earth's atmosphere, the ozone layer. So in order to look at this region of the spectrum, the ultraviolet, we have to go out into space. What we do in particular is that we look for emission from interstellar gas. So you get things like supernovae remnants. This is lots of hot gas, and they'll have these lines, atomic and molecular lines, in the ultraviolet. So that's what we will observe from the space station.
Yeah, tell us the more details about this. What those emissions, information about the emission of those atoms and molecules in the outer space can tell us about what kind of the secret of the space can be revealed through your experiments.
Sure. So most of the pictures that you see are made from cameras. So you get a very nice overview of what that region looks like. But when you want to look at the physics of what's happening, when you want to look at things like the abundance, how much of that gas is there, when you want to look at a temperature there, whether it's 100 degrees or 10,000 degrees or 1,000,000 degrees, all of that comes from these spectra, where you look at individual atomic emission lines. So you might see things like 3 times ionized carbon, carbon-4, and you will see an emission line from that. Now, if you have a camera, you don't get to differentiate the different elements. But because we have a spectrograph, what we will do is we will see the carbon over here, we might see oxygen over here, nitrogen over here. And so this is a way for us to tell what is in that space. We can tell the temperature, we can tell the pressure, we can look at how much of it is there. And all of this can only be done with a spectrograph. Now, the main problem we have is that because we're on the space station, we're actually mounted to the space station. So as the space station goes around the Earth, we'll scan the sky. We don't get to choose where we point. We just point in one direction. So we still have to see what we will actually observe, but there should be lots of interesting areas in the sky that we'll get.
Thank you so much, Professor Murthy, for being with us today, and good luck to your experiments in the outer space.
Thanks, Professor. Now, CTTN spoke with French astronaut Michel Tognini, the former head of the Astronaut Division at the European Astronaut Center, and he talked about China's space program and the cooperation between China and Europe.
Well, the Chinese space program is really nice. I think it's a new program, and they use a classical rocket and a classical spacecraft, similar to the Soyuz. We call it the Shenzhou. And so far, it's the first space agency compared to the Russian and American space agency. It's the first space agency that did the whole pattern of access to space without any accident. So they flew with 1 taikonaut, then they flew with 2 taikonaut, they flew with 1 spacecraft, 2 spacecraft. They did the docking rendezvous system, and they did the first space station, second space station, and then third space station. So they are on the path to go to the moon and to go to Mars very quickly because they're very safe, and they use a reliable system, and they use also lessons learned from the big space agencies. So the cooperation between the European Space Agency and the Chinese Space Agency started already 15 years ago. I remember when they came to visit the European Astronaut Center in Cologne. At the time, I was the head of the center, and we started slowly this cooperation. And so far, today, we have a real nice cooperation between taikonaut and astronaut. So the taikonaut are coming regularly for 2 weeks training time in Cologne at ESE, and the European astronauts are also going to travel to Beijing for training on the Chinese Space Center. And we have already 2 or 3 European astronauts speaking Chinese very well. So we are on the good path for a nice cooperation with human people. And also, I believe that one day a European will fly on the Chinese space station or the Chinese moon space station.
And now we're joined by another guest, Zhang Hu, the project scientist of the Tianhe Survey Space Telescope, and which will also be deployed with the China Space Station in the future. So as China's first space station telescope, tell us about this progress made so far and what its role shall be on the China Space Station. Mr. Zhang.
So we have this survey space telescope. It's as you know, it's a major science project of China Manned Space Program. It's also one of the 14 systems of China Manned Space Program. Now, the science payloads and research are also part of the space application system. Now, we are in usually the space projects will go through 3 phases after approval, between approval and launch. The first phase will be the design phase, and then development phase, and then qualification and production phase. We are now in the second phase.
Okay.
Now, the second phase, in the second phase, we'll build a number of models. The most important one will be the qualification model, and it will be subject to rigorous tests to verify its performance. And we expect to complete the qualification model next year. So the telescope will be orbiting in the same orbit as the space station. So that means it can be serviced by the space station. During normal operations, it will be far apart from the space station. But when it's needed, it can fly closer to the space station and dock with the space station. And then it can be serviced. We can refill it and can upgrade instruments on the telescope.
All right, so actually this telescope is not attached on the space station, but they just are flying together in the same orbit. So, well, tell us more about whether the Tianhe telescope's mission and what scientific operations can we expect from it.
So the telescope will be launched with 5 first-generation instruments. That includes a survey camera, a terahertz receiver, multi-band imaging, multi-channel imager, an integral field spectrograph, and a coplanet imaging coronagraph. These are 5 instruments. The most important task for this telescope is to carry out a very long.
It seems we lost the signal, but thank you so much. That's Professor Zhang Hu, the leading scientist for the Tianhe Space Telescope. Let's get back to our studio guest.
What a day for China's space industry. This is a mission 29 years in the making, right? And some say being part of China's space program is like on board a express train. How do you make that?
Yes, you know that we have a continuous, slow but steady step to have our own station. Today we have our dream have come true. I can still remember during the live coverage in 2011, my first cooperation with CGTN. At that moment, Mr. Zhou Yue mentioned that today we are one step closer to have our own space station. And today it becomes true.
Here we are.
Yes, exactly. And this afternoon or this evening, when our astronauts go inside the station, they will enjoy their lives in our station. I believe that will be more exciting moment for all of us.
And what will be their first major tasks when they, can complete the dock and rendezvous and got into the space station?
Well, I think first thing is to flip the switches. They have to turn on the station and make sure that the connections are successful. And They have to do some, like Yuguang said, the hibernation of the capsule, and then they open the cargo ship, and they take out all the necessary stuff, and they, I think, dig in is one of the things. They have to start the feeding themselves. So lots of things to look forward. I think they get changed, and they get comfortable with the station. So that's the first thing they will do, and they also have to synchronize with the ground crew on their working schedules and working times. So a synchronized working time, not to work overnight, is also another thing to do. So they have to turn in at the appropriate time. So they have a few hours in preparation. So quite a few things to do. Do the undressing and do the
change into that penguin suit.
Open the deliveries. Yes.
So it's more of a, you know, it's like moving into a new house instead of everything.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now but now they're I think their living apartment is not fully functional, right? So they're first to stay.
Their job is to build their own home. I mean,
Yes.
this is the first segment. The Tianhe is the only the core module, and they have to perform a number of missions to renovate and to build their own home. And they're looking forward to have the second and third fuselage, as well as more cargo ships to come and dock with the station. So they are the very first crew to see everything from the very beginning. So they're going to do their job during this 3 months period, including EVA activities, assembly, integrating, and testing of all facilities. Make sure that the very crucial part, which is the life support system, functions well, and the recycled system, including urines, water, and waste recycles. And the water recycle has to be electronically charged to produce oxygens and methanes and hydrogens. All of this stuff has to work perfectly before they welcome the second batch of the astronauts.
Well, gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you with me and Yang Zhao here, witnessing the history being made right here. As we say, exploring the universe, exploring the boundary of the universe is the shared dream for mankind, right? Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us here for our coverage. And Shenzhou 12 spacecraft, as we speak, is now in orbit. In the next few hours, about 6 to 7 hours, it will complete its rendezvous and docking with the Tianhe core module of the Chinese space station. And when that happens, CGTN will bring you full coverage on here, right here.
We're going to keep you updated. So China successfully launched its first manned mission for the building of the space station earlier this morning, and with 3 astronauts on board. And before we go, let's take a look back at the key moments.
And thank you for watching. Bye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Right, as we've seen, China has sent 3 astronauts on its first manned mission since 2016. The Shenzhou-12 was launched from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in northwest China's Gobi Desert. The spaceship will dock with the core module of China's space station, the Tianhe, or Heavenly Harmony, and the astronauts will live there for 3 months to help build the station. This is China's 7th manned space mission since the first one in 2003. So why does China want to build its own space station? CGTN's Wu Lei explains.
Here on Earth, an apple will fall due to gravity's influence, but in outer space, it floats like this. But how might this apple mutate in a microgravity environment? What might happen when an astronaut eats this apple? China has sent 11 astronauts into space since 2003. During their time in space, the astronauts had carried out a variety of experiments, but their time for each visit was limited. China is aiming to remedy this by building a brand new space station by the end of 2022, which is expected to remain in space for over 10 years, allowing astronauts who spend time there to engage in longer physical, biological, and cosmological experiments. As for experiments, Chinese scientists are interested in growing plants. These flowers and vegetables were grown from seeds mutated in space. The effects of living in space are also of concern for scientists. Knowing how to guarantee the ability for astronauts to have a healthy long-term stay in space could pave the way for future space travel. China's new space station won't just be for Chinese scientists, but also for global scientists as well. So far, a total of 9 projects proposed by 17 countries, including Germany, France, and Italy, have been selected for the first round of experiments to be conducted in this new space lab. This new facility is expected to open up a brand new chapter in human space exploration. Wu Lei, CGTN.
For China's space program and cooperation between China and Europe. Earlier, we spoke with French astronaut Michel Tognini, the former head of the astronaut division at the European Astronaut Center.
Well, the Chinese space program is really nice. I think it's a new program, and they use a classical rocket and a classical spacecraft, similar to the Soyuz. We call it the Shenzhou. And so far, it's the first space agency compared to the Russian and American space agency. It's the first space agency that did the whole pattern of access to space without any accident. So they flew with 1 taikonaut, then they flew with 2 taikonauts, they flew with 1 spacecraft, 2 spacecraft. They did the docking rendezvous system, and they did the first space station, second space station, and then third space station. So they are on the path to go to the moon and to go to Mars very quickly because they're very safe, and they use a reliable system, and they use also lessons learned from the big space agencies. So the cooperation between the European Space Agency and the Chinese Space Agency started already 15 years ago. I remember when they came to visit the European Astronaut Center in Cologne. At the time I was the head of the center, and we started slowly this cooperation, and so far today we have a real nice cooperation between a taikonaut and astronaut. So the taikonaut are coming regularly for 2 weeks training time in Cologne at ESE, and the European astronauts are also going to travel to Beijing for training on the Chinese Space Center, and we have already 2 or 3 European astronauts speaking Chinese very well. So we are on the good path for a nice cooperation with human people. And also, I believe that one day a European will fly on the Chinese space station or on the Chinese moon space station.
100 years of trailblazing, 100 years of striving, from extreme poverty to a well-off society, from a sleeping giant to a responsible global power. Mission and vision from the past and into the future. Decoding the Communist Party of China. Centenary and beyond, only on CGTN.
Now, a day-long summit in Geneva between the presidents of Russia and the United States wrapped up early on Wednesday. On the agenda was everything from cybersecurity and human rights to the environment. Although both agreed progress was made over diplomats returning to their posts, stark differences still remain over a host of other issues, including China. Now, Tony Waterman has more from Geneva.
President Biden struck a realistic but optimistic tone at the end of this meeting. He said his talks with the Russian president were good, that they were positive, and that there were no threats issues. This is really echoing what we heard from Mr. Putin himself, who called these talks constructive. This is notable because even until the very last moments, there was concerns that there would be a lot of animosity in the room when these two presidents met, because there was a lot of tough issues that needed to be addressed. But at the end of the day, they were able to reach agreement on a few issues, most notably on cybersecurity. They're going to put together working groups to discuss this issue of making the internet safer from hackers. Of course, a big issue for the United States, which has concerns over election meddling, also a series of attacks on vital infrastructure in the United States. And President Biden said that he did present President Putin with a list of 16 critical pieces of infrastructure that he believes should be off limits. Now they have to find some common ground on that list. They also made some progress on a new arms control agreement. They are going to have discussions on the New START treaty. This is something that was just renewed in February for 5 years. Perhaps they will expand that to include new types of emerging weaponry or new types of emerging technology that can be used in warfare. They also agreed to return ambassadors to each other's countries.
I did what I came to do. Number one, identify areas of practical work our two countries can do to advance our mutual interest and also benefit the world.
So a little bit of progress made, but when President Biden was asked whether he believed that Putin would change his behavior, he said he was not confident. The real test, he said, is going to come in the next 3 to 6 months to see how things progress, see how these conversations progress, and also see how Russia acts towards the United States. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Geneva.
Now, a Palestinian woman was shot dead in the West Bank today after attempting to ram Israeli soldiers with her car and attack them with a knife. And earlier, Israel and Palestine had conducted their first round of exchange of attacks since a ceasefire ended 11 days of deadly fighting last month. Israeli aircraft struck Gaza today in response to incendiary balloons launched from the Palestinian enclave. Hamas' initial attacks from Gaza on Tuesday occurred a few hours before a march by far-right Jewish nationalists took place in East Jerusalem. The rally celebrated Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem in 1967. Stephanie Freed reports from Tel Aviv.
The biggest sign of escalation that we saw would have been certainly the hours leading into the march that you mentioned on Tuesday, and then while the march was happening, because Hamas in Gaza had said that if the march were to proceed, they were threatening they were going to fire rockets on Israel, and that would have threatened to immediately escalate the situation pretty much back to where it was earlier in the month, 3 weeks ago, when a ceasefire, before a ceasefire was declared between the sides. But the march was slightly rerouted. Police by the thousands were there securing the people who were marching, trying to keep the Palestinians and those nationalist flag-waving people actually screaming things like death to Arabs and we'll burn down your villages, police were trying to keep them apart from Palestinians. For the most part, they did. Dozens of Palestinians were injured in clashes, and as you noted, dozens of incendiary balloons were floated across from Gaza into southern Israel. That broke one of the agreements of the ceasefire that the sides had agreed to several weeks ago. And so Israel's government, newest government, said that they were trying to de-escalate the situation in general around that march, but that they would respond, and we saw that their response, airstrikes on Gaza, happened overnight Tuesday.
Now, China has slammed the US and the European Union for accusing Beijing of economic coercion and launching disinformation campaigns.
The EU-US summit statement goes far beyond the scope of the normal development of bilateral relations. It unreasonably interferes in China's internal affairs and creates and spreads false information. China expressed strong dissatisfaction and is firmly opposed to it. What the US and EU should do is to reflect on their own serious problems.
Now, flights between China and South Africa have been suspended after 32 people tested positive for coronavirus on the flight from Johannesburg to Shenzhen. South Africa has been hit a third wave of the pandemic. Over 13,000 new cases were reported on Thursday, the most since January. And the country has restricted alcohol sales, tightened curfew, and reduced the number of people allowed to attend gatherings as it moves back to lockdown level 3. President Cyril Ramaphosa made the announcement on national television. Now, France is easing several coronavirus restrictions. It's no longer mandatory to wear masks outdoors from Thursday, and it will halt an 8-month nightly curfew this weekend. It comes as the government extends its vaccination campaign to include more young people. Ross Cullen reports.
Another milestone for the COVID-19 vaccination campaign in France. Children getting their coronavirus shots for the first time. The move is being strictly controlled. Vaccinations can only be given with the child's consent, their parents' oral and written consent, and if the jab takes place in the presence of the child's parents.
C'est pas trop tôt, et c'est pas trop tard.
It's not too early nor too late. I think it's good. I am myself vaccinated. Maybe my son is immune, but I think it is good. We have a pass to travel now. This could be a pass to get back to almost normal and be more serene. If my son wants to get vaccinated, I am all for it.
I think it's a good thing, and as soon as I can get vaccinated, I will do it. That would reassure me, and I'll be able to do more things.
France has gone from the problems of the sluggish rollout of vaccines at the start of the year to being one of the first countries to offer jabs to children.
We saw some teenagers who want to be vaccinated with the understanding that they would like their college or their high school to not be closed next year. They also want to be able to go on holiday more freely. And several spoke spontaneously about collective immunity.
All those youngsters who do receive a dose will get the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which was approved by Europe's drugs regulator last month for use in 12 to 15-year-olds.
The government wants to continue to drive uptake of the vaccine across the population to try to mirror the unlocking strategy and to combat the clusters of the Delta variant we are starting to see here.
As France progressively expands its vaccination campaign, it's also progressively lifting the remaining restrictions in place, hoping for a safe, successful summer season without a subsequent surge in cases in September. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
Now, the US is among the fastest to vaccinate. It's now about half the population. The rate is even higher in San Francisco. The California city is close to having 70% of eligible residents fully vaccinated. It's a key benchmark that would make San Francisco the first US city to approach herd immunity. Mark New has the details.
Having opened in April 2020, San Francisco's Embarcadero testing site has conducted nearly 500,000 COVID-19 tests, with results available within 36 hours 99% of the time. But today, cars coming through are few and far between. The Embarcadero high-volume testing site was one of the first mass testing sites in the United States open to the general public. But now it's entering its final day of operation, ready to close its doors. And that's a good sign.
As a pandemic has changed, as more vaccine has become available and more people have been vaccinated, we definitely have seen testing numbers decrease. And we've actually gone from about a 5% positivity rate in January down to a 0.6% positivity rate. So given that, we are pivoting our testing efforts to really look at neighborhoods that are most impacted.
As of this weekend, of those eligible, 80% of San Franciscans have had their first dose of vaccine and 70% are fully vaccinated.
We are the biggest municipality that has this high of a level of vaccination. So yes, it is unparalleled. I do think we've probably achieved that elusive herd immunity. Remember what herd immunity means. It does not mean eradication. It means getting levels so low that those who are non-immune, like children who can't be vaccinated, are protected by the immunity of those around us. That's the standard definition of herd immunity.
Gandhi says the willingness of San Franciscans to get vaccinated, combined with a tech-driven population, have fueled the city's success. She also cites strong community outreach efforts to educate specific neighborhoods and provide vaccines on site.
And at 80% first dose, we have very low rates of infection. We haven't had a death in the city for over a month. And we also have low hospitalizations. And now the only way to fundamentally know that you're at herd immunity for a virus is to open up and keep on testing and ensure that cases and hospitalizations don't go up.
That's being put to the test as the state of California loosens masking restrictions with a reopening of the economy. While testing has scaled back, the public health department says it cannot let down its guard.
We know that there are variants that are occurring throughout the world that are making their way into the US. And these variants tend to be more infectious in nature and could cause more hospitalizations and worse disease. So we are carefully monitoring all of that information to ensure as we reopen that we still have a handle on COVID. But right now, everything is looking good.
Baba says it's important her department continues to spread the message that in order for businesses to stay open and residents to feel comfortable in crowded places, the best solution is to get vaccinated. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
100 years ago, when the Communist Party of China was founded, the nation was ravaged by wars, coerced by foreign powers, and suffered from a dilapidated economy and corrupt politics. It was weak in almost all respects. After a century of struggles, persistence, and triumphs, the nation is transformed and reborn. From the economy to infrastructure, from education to healthcare, we let the numbers showcase how far China has come. Follow CGTN as we take a deep dive into the figures that tell China's story. China by numbers, only on CGTN.